Chapter 829. Su Peijian didn't realize what Ling Jing, that bastard, had done until she stood in front of the mirror. Looking at the marks on her shoulders, Yu Xiong's mouth, and even her arms, she was so angry that her face turned green. Tomorrow night was the company's annual meeting, and she had to attend it in a gown. How could she attend in her current state? She secretly gritted her teeth, wishing she could skin Ling Jing, chop him up, and feed him to the dogs. Damn that man. The anger on Su Peijian's face was obvious, especially when she found that even the simple action of walking felt weak in her legs. She really wanted to punch that bastard. She had always been disdainful of hiding her emotions. When she went out, she inevitably showed it on her face. Ling Jing knew that he had made this woman unhappy again yesterday. But so what? This was just the beginning. To conquer her. To make this woman fascinated by him. Whether in bed or out of bed, that was his goal. Thinking of this, Ling Jing looked at Su Peijian, who was about to go out with her bag and coat, and quickly stepped forward. You're going to work? Let me walk you. If young Master Ling's subordinates saw his gentle tone, their eyes would probably pop out. When had they seen young Master Ling so patient with a woman? No need. Su Peijian looked at him with some disdain in her eyes. Although she was afraid of the cold, she had always hated wearing too much. Today, she had tied a silk scarf around her neck to hide the marks on her neck. Fortunately, when he went to the office later, there was a heater. It would definitely be hot. How was she going to take off the scarf? Her tone wasn't very good, but Ling Jing, who already had a plan, didn't care at all. Darling, I think it's better if I give it to you. As Ling Jing spoke, he glanced at Su Peijian, and his gaze fell on her waist for a while. After all, your legs should be a little weak now, right? Su Peijian glared at Ling Jing, and an ice blade flashed in her eyes. She took 2 steps forward and stood in front of him, reaching out and grabbing the front of the man's shirt. I'll say it again, no need. Darling, are you angry? Ling Jing clicked his tongue, and looked at her, grabbing his hand. You still have the strength to be angry? It seems that I was merciful yesterday. Su Peijian was about to speak, but Ling Jing lowered his head and kissed her lips. It was a very provocative kiss. Su Peijian's hands were still holding onto the front of his shirt. She wanted to push him away, but her body's memory unconsciously responded. At the last moment, Su Peijian pushed him away. His breathing quickened as he took a step back. She glanced at him coldly, and walked out without looking back. You really don't want me to send you? Don't worry. I'm not only good at that, I'm also good at driving. Su Peijian's reaction was to pull the door open and slam it shut. Su Peijian didn't want to go back to Rome Garden that night, but she thought that if she went home, she would have to take off the scarf. Xiang Kaiping might see the marks on her body. She gritted her teeth, and had no choice but to return to Rome Garden at night. It was close to the end of the year, but she always did not go home. Xiang Kaiping felt uneasy, and felt that there was still a gap between her and Xiang Kaiping. Su Peijian couldn't explain. She just said that she was too busy at the company. Anyway, when the new house was renovated, and it was closer to the company, she would accompany her more. After taking a shower, she found Ling Jing lying on her bed. She had no time to pay attention to him. She did her pre-bedtime maintenance. When she lay down, she wanted to chase Ling Jing to the study to sleep. However, he turned over and pressed himself on top of her. Get off. Not today. Are you willing to? Ling Jing pressed her waist to let her feel his passion. This damned woman had just taken off her clothes and put on moisturizer. Her movements were so slow and seductive. If she wasn't seducing him, what was she doing? Ling Jing, I want to rest today. Don't worry, I'll only do it once. He lowered his head and kissed her lips, not giving her a chance to refuse. Su Peijian's refusal was not thorough. He had to admit that Ling Jing was indeed an expert in this aspect. Not only was he full of tricks, but he could always find her point. Most of all, he made her body happy. While her body was happy, the emptiness in her heart could be forgotten. This was the first annual meeting after Xiang Kaiping handed over the department store to Su Peijian. Because it was the first time, she made it very grand, and booked a relatively famous 5-star hotel in Rong City. The dress that Su Peijian originally picked was a white one with slanted shoulders. Because of that bastard Ling Jing, there were many marks on her body, neck and shoulders. Even after a day, it didn't disappear. Su Peijian had to change her plan and choose a dark purple cheongsam. This color couldn't be suppressed by ordinary people. Not to mention that the cheongsam was particularly picky about the figure. Su Peijian had a good figure and temperament. This outfit complemented her and could only make her temperament more outstanding. She came directly from the company. She had originally said that she was going to pick up Xiang Kaiping, but unexpectedly, Xiang Kaiping said that she had someone to send her. Xiang Kaiping was used to saving money. Su Peijian thought that she had taken a taxi. Unexpectedly, the person who sent her turned out to be the man she had met once. Mrs. Lin's son. Peijian. When Xiang Kaiping saw Su Peijian, she was still a little afraid that she would be unhappy. However, yesterday, Mrs. Lin took the initiative to ask about Su Peijian. Her son also came to visit. Although he said it was to visit a new neighbor, he actually had an ulterior motive. When Xiang Kaiping heard that there was a chance, she immediately perked up. So she mentioned that there was an annual meeting at the company today. She asked him to send her over. First, she wanted Su Peijian to meet him. Second, she wanted to give the two of them a chance. However, she had her own selfish motives. She didn't mention a word about Su Peijian's imprisonment. From the moment Lin Feixing entered the door, his eyes had never left Su Peijian. His obviously stunned expression made her feel that she had made the right decision. This is what I told you before. Mrs. Lin's son knew that I was coming, so he sent me here on his way. I was thinking that since you don't have a dance partner today, why don't you ask him to be your dance partner later? Xiang Kaiping said it very casually, but the meaning behind her words was self-evident. Su Peijian had a headache. She met the man's somewhat eager gaze. She really couldn't accept Xiang Kaiping's actions. Sure. Hello. Miss Su, right? I'm Lin Feixing. I heard my mother mention you. Lin Feixing stood at the side and spoke at the right time. He was wearing a dark suit today. He looked a little more formal than that day. His elite demeanor wasn't annoying, but it also couldn't be compared to him recently. Hello. There was not much enthusiasm on Su Peijian's face. She was willing to bet that Xiang Kaiping didn't tell him about her situation. Thank you for sending my mother here. There are a lot of things to do today, so I might not be a good host. This way, please. You don't have to entertain me. I can sit with Auntie Su. Lin Feixing expressed his attitude at the right time. He was not impatient or cold. His propriety was just right. Su Peijian couldn't help but take another look at him. Then she went to greet the others. In addition to the company's employees, Su Peijian also invited some people from her partners. The annual party was quite lively. She followed the process when she was at the Li Corporation, just a little less. After all, the Li family had many more employees than this. To her, this was really just a small event. Lin Feixing sat next to Xiang Kaiping and watched Su Peijian become the main character of the party with ease. His eyes became more and more eager. Xiang Kaiping looked at Lin Feixing and felt a little relieved. In fact, she had a lot of things to say, but it was not appropriate to say a word here. Peijian is really very capable. Ever since she joined the company, I haven't been involved in the company's affairs. She is very good at it. Yes, I can see that. Lin Feixing's eyes never left Su Peijian. Xiang Kaiping was even more satisfied. She hoped that Su Peijian could be happy. Even if Su Peijian said that she didn't want to get married as a woman, if she didn't get married, who knew how much criticism there would be? She herself had been like that all the way, and that was because she had run far enough. When explaining to others, she only said that her husband died early, and that she didn't want to find another one. But even so, she had experienced a lot of criticism and looks over the years. She didn't want Su Peijian to go through that again. In the end, she still believed that women should have a place to return to. Su Peijian went on stage to give a speech, summarizing the past and looking forward to the future. During the opening dance, as expected, Lin Feixing asked her to dance. Because Xiang Kaiping was there, Su Peijian didn't refuse. As she spun with Lin Feixing on the dance floor, her voice was very soft. Mr. Lin, I think there might be something my mother didn't explain to you clearly. You don't have to be so polite. Just call me Feixing. Su Peijian wasn't in a hurry to change the way she addressed him. She looked in Xiang Saiping's direction, who was looking at her with a gratified expression. She had a headache. In some ways, she really didn't like what Xiang Kaiping did. Xiang Kaiping was her mother, the only family she had left. Mr. Lin, I know what my mother means, and I can roughly understand what you mean. But I want to tell you that some people are not like what you see. I know, so I really want to know more about you, Miss Su. Lin Feixing's enthusiasm didn't diminish. Can I call you by your name, Peijian? I think your name is very nice. It's too distant to call you Miss Su. I've been in prison. Su Peijian's voice was very soft, but it made Lin Feixing's expression change. Miss Su, you. The two of them were still spinning on the dance floor. In terms of appearance, Lin Feixing was quite outstanding, but he wasn't Su Peijian's type. It should be said that at this stage, she wouldn't like any kind of man. 2 years ago, because of some reasons I did something wrong. Then I was put in prison for 2 years. Even though Lin Feixing had been abroad, studied abroad, and had dealt with many big situations, when faced with Su Peijian's attitude, he didn't know how to respond for a moment. I've not only been in prison, but I've also been engaged. I've had other men before that. Su Peijian's dance steps were different, and the corners of her mouth were even curled up the whole time. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. She used an extremely cold tone to talk about her past. Mr. Lin, I hope you understand that I'm not like what you see. I'm also a good woman in the traditional sense. I can even say that I'm a bad woman. So, Mr. Lin, thank you for your kindness. The dance music was coming to an end. Su Peijian spun around, her expression much calmer than before. When the last circle stopped, Su Peijian stood still and bowed to Lin Feixing. Mr. Lin, thank you for driving my mother here today, but I don't think we're suitable. She nodded slightly, turned around, and walked in Xiang Saiping's direction. When Xiang Kaiping saw her coming, her eyes lit up. How is it? How is Feixing? Su Peijian put her hand to her forehead. She just sat in his car, and she already called his name. Xiang Saiping's rhythm was really fast. Mom, Manager Zhang and Manager Lin wanted to say hello to you just now. Let's go over. Peijian, let's talk about this when we get back, okay? Okay. As long as Su Peijian was willing to give him a chance, it was always good. After the annual party, Lin Feixing didn't leave. Su Peijian drank some wine, and Xiang Kaiping suggested that she take Lin Feixing's car. Lin Feixing looked at Su Peijian, and she didn't refuse. Back at the villa, Su Peijian didn't rush upstairs. Instead, she sat down with Xiang Kaiping in the living room. Mom, Peijian, what do you think of Feixing? I talked to him for a while today, and I think he's quite good. You can give him a chance, and I can also give you. Mom. Su Peijian stopped Xiang Kaiping from continuing. I just told Mr. Lin that I was in prison. Xiang Saiping's expression changed. She looked at Su Peijian blankly, unable to believe that Su Peijian would do that. No matter what, she had to get in touch with him, right? If there were feelings, maybe Lin Feixing wouldn't mind. Mom, I thank you for your concern. I mean it. But I really hope that you understand. A woman's way out is not necessarily marriage, and I don't have any thoughts about that now. But that Feixing is really good. Mom, marriage isn't just about talking about conditions. At least you have to like him. At least there's sincerity. Su Peijian really didn't want to quarrel with Xiang Kaiping over this, but she really didn't want it to happen again. I don't intend to lie to anyone about me. If he can accept it, then accept it. If not, then forget it. If you are really that worried about me, I can get married, but I won't be happy. Xiang Kaiping was speechless. She didn't know what was wrong, and why Su Peijian would have such a thought. Also, Mom, I only have you now. You and I will depend on each other for the rest of our lives. Even if we don't get married, I feel good about it. Is that okay? What else could Xiang Kaiping say after what she had said? Then that's it. Her eyes were filled with guilt again. Su Peijian didn't want to stay any longer, so she stood up. Mom, the plane is tomorrow morning. I'm going upstairs to sleep. You should sleep early too. Xiang Kaiping nodded, still unwilling to give up. Peijian, if Lin Feixing doesn't mind what happened in the past, can you give him a chance? Su Peijian had already decided to go upstairs, but hearing her words, she stopped. Seeing the passion in Xiang Caiping's eyes, she finally nodded. Okay, I promise you. If Lin Feixing doesn't mind, I will give him a chance. Xiang Caiping breathed a sigh of relief. That was good. She was afraid that Su Peijian would reject anyone. Ling Jing had used his masculine charm to make Su Peijian beg for mercy yesterday. At least that was how he understood it. He thought that Su Peijian would come again today. However, he didn't expect that Su Peijian not only didn't come that night, but she also didn't come the next night. In the next 2 or 3 days, Su Peijian didn't show up at all. Not even a phone call or text message. Ling Jing, who was about to celebrate the new year, suddenly became irritable. He asked Gu Xiu to check it out. He wanted to know if that woman had gone to find another gigolo. After checking, he found out that the woman had gone abroad. She had taken her mother, whom she had met halfway, to the Aegean Sea. Woman. All of a sudden, Ling Jing felt that his masculine charm had suddenly become useless. Gu Xiu looked at Ling Jing's gloomy face, not understanding how Su Peijian's going abroad had angered Ling Jing. Young master, it's almost the new year. Shouldn't you go home? Madam has been talking about you for a long time. What's there to talk about? So what if it's the new year? The new year is the most boring. A group of people wished each other a happy new year with fake faces. TSK. Thinking about it made his teeth ache. Young master. Gu Xiu was having a headache. Madam and master both want you to go home. Besides, the new year is the day after tomorrow. Alright, stop nagging. That woman had gone abroad. This shabby apartment was indeed meaningless. I'll go back. But keep an eye on her. If that woman comes back, remember to tell me. Gu Xiu couldn't hide his shock, but he managed to keep the expression on his face. He looked at his young master. In all these years, he had never seen him care so much about a woman. Young master, don't tell me you've fallen for that Miss Su? Based on Miss Su's situation, he was afraid that master wouldn't be able to accept her. Gu Xiu felt a knock on his head. What nonsense are you talking about? Why would I fall for her? Let's go home. As if to prove his words, Ling Jing moved much faster this time. Gu Xiu followed behind him, the premonition in his heart growing stronger. Young master, if you don't like Miss Su, do I have to report to you that she's back? Gu Xiu received the second knock on his head that day. Su Peijian took Xiang Caiping to the Aegean Sea for 5 days, and took her to France for the remaining 5 days. She had been to these places before, but Xiang Caiping hadn't. The last time Xiang Caiping went abroad was with Su Qingsang. This time, she was with Su Peijian. As long as Su Peijian didn't ask Su Peijian to get married or find a man, the mother and daughter got along well. 10 days passed, and it was already the 8th day of the Lunar New Year. Su Peijian finally returned to Rong City with Xiang Caiping. After returning home, Su Peijian threw herself back into work. The company's online platform and online shopping were doing well. In addition, it was during the Spring Festival, so this month's turnover was very good. Su Peijian enjoyed work, and the sense of accomplishment that work brought. After this wave of work, she thought of Ling Jing again. Making money could make people happy. So could increasing wealth. But physical happiness often came in a simpler and more direct way. Before returning to Rome Garden, Su Peijian sent a message to Ling Jing, telling him that she would go over tonight. During this period, she hadn't received a message from Ling Jing about spending money. First, she had cancelled the message. Second, since the money was given to Ling Jing, it was his. He could spend it however he wanted. She had no intention of asking. According to that man's personality, the money should be almost spent. Anything that could be bought with money was cheap in Su Peijian's eyes. She naturally believed that Ling Jing would definitely be waiting for her. So when Su Peijian returned home and didn't see Ling Jing, she was a little surprised. That man didn't spend all his money during the Spring Festival? The doubt only lasted for a moment. Su Peijian quickly put this matter behind her. She didn't ask about Ling Jing's background, nor did she ask about Ling Jing's family. She didn't want to ask, and she didn't need to. Since he wasn't around, she would just relax. After opening a bottle of wine, Su Peijian sat on the balcony and looked at the night outside the window. Rong City was actually very prosperous, and the development here was also good. But she would always think of Lin City from time to time. She still remembered that her apartment was renovated by Li Qianxue. She still remembered her university graduation ceremony. Li Qianxue attended it with Su Qinghui and Su Yusen. She also remembered the first cooperation she negotiated in the company, the first time she independently proposed a plan. Those memories had never been mentioned in front of Xiang Kaiping, but they came back to her from time to time in her dreams. She drank the wine in the glass in one gulp. When she was about to pour herself more wine, the wine bottle in her hand was taken away. She didn't know when Ling Jing had returned and was sitting next to her. Drinking alone? Is it because you're lonely late at night when I'm not around? Damn that woman. She was gone for more than 10 days without a call or a text. It was fine that she didn't look for him when she came back. But today, she only sent a cold message saying that she was coming over. This woman was really ruthless and cold. Su Peijian ignored him. She wanted to get the wine bottle, but was stopped by Ling Jing. Ling Jing poured a glass of wine into her glass, took the glass in her hand, and took a sip. He lowered his head and sealed it with a kiss. His kiss was filled with hostility and rudeness. He was actually very angry. When he saw the message, his first reaction was anger, and his second reaction was not to come. He was not that woman's pet. Why should he show up with a text from Su Peijian? If he didn't come, what could she do to him? If he didn't want to show up, this woman wouldn't be able to find him even if she turned Rong City upside down. But when he threw the phone aside, his mind was thinking of Su Peijian's snow-white skin and her passionate reaction. He couldn't control his body. He told himself that he hadn't conquered this damn woman. He hadn't made her addicted to him and obsessed with him. So of course he had to come. Not only did he have to come, but he also had to keep nibbling away at her and make this woman fall in love with him little by little. The wine wasn't strong, but it was sweet. Su Peijian's wine was good. Of course, her taste was even better. Su Peijian didn't resist. She came over today to ask him to do it. She wasn't a pretentious woman. She put her hands around his neck and took the initiative. Chapter 830. Her voice was like a bell, and her eyes were like silk. But with the last bit of stubbornness, go back to the room. Ling Jing ignored her. Instead, he held her waist and sat down on the sofa with her in his arms. Right here. No. Su Peijian refused. This kind of thing could only make people feel more secure in bed. Ling Jing lowered his head and began to bite her neck. Yes. The other kind of stimulation made Su Peijian unable to say the rest of her words. In the end, she couldn't go back to the room. Ling Jing took another sip of wine and fed her again, over and over again, and finally the red wine was drunk. Her body softened and heated up. The man's strength and the woman's gentleness were fully integrated at this moment. The temperature in the room rose steadily. Everything was gradually out of control. The rain stopped and the clouds dispersed. Su Peijian just collapsed on the sofa. She had no strength and didn't want to move. The man held her waist so that she wouldn't fall off the sofa. At this time, she was glad that she had changed the sofa to a bigger one for comfort. Neither of them wore clothes, and the room was heated enough. It wasn't cold, and it was even a little hot. Ling Jing looked at Su Peijian, lowered his head, looked at her smooth neck, and couldn't help but bite again. Su Peijian really couldn't bear it anymore. She looked up at him, her eyes almost spewing fire. Ling Jing didn't care. He bit very happily left and right. After a while, Su Peijian's shoulders and neck couldn't be seen. Are you a dog? Su Peijian pushed his head, but Ling Jing surrounded her whole body. He lowered his head and was about to bite her again, but under Su Peijian's stare, he tilted his head. She got up and left him, but she didn't want him to buckle her waist again. She drank some wine, and that little bit of drunkenness was starting to get to her head. Now she needed to go to sleep. One more time. Let go. How could Ling Jing be willing to let go? He flipped over and got on top of her again. Then he started a new round of attacking and plundering. Outside the window, snowflakes began to fall. This was the first snow of the new year. The snow fell silently. The temperature outside slowly dropped, but the temperature inside slowly rose. At that moment, Su Peijian forgot everything. Perhaps she was really drunk. His mind was blank. All he could sense and feel was the happiness in his body. The next day, when he woke up, it was already silvery white outside. It rarely snowed in Lin City. There was almost no snow in her memory. However, it snowed every winter in Rong City. It snowed not only in winter but also in spring. Today was Saturday, so she didn't have to work. Sleeping on the bed, he felt a little lazy. There was a strong arm around her waist, but she calmly moved it away. He stood up. His legs were still a little weak. He turned around and glanced at Ling Jing. This man was really impolite in some aspects. A little red wine would not make her drunk. Instead, it would wake her up. The more awake she was, the calmer she would be. He calmly tidied himself up and went to the kitchen to make breakfast for himself. It was snowing, and she didn't have much experience driving in the snow. Perhaps she should call a taxi to go back to the villa, to see Xiang Kaiping. A hand appeared on her waist, and she was pulled into someone's embrace. She instinctively slapped the man's hand. "Let go." "I'm not letting go." Ling Jing buried his face in her neck. His eyes were still half closed, as if he hadn't woken up yet. "Why did you get up earlier than me? It seems that I should have come a few more times last night." "I said let go." Su Peijian elbowed her back, neither too lightly nor too heavily. Ling Jing had to let go of her. She took a step forward and continued what she was doing. Ling Jing leaned against the processing table next to him and watched Su Peijian's movements. She was really beautiful, and there was a natural elegance in her movements. He understood that she had been carefully cultivated by a big family. But besides elegance, this woman was also very cold. Perhaps it was because of the 2 years in prison, or the fall from a high place. She looked beautiful and charming on the surface, but there was a kind of alienation and indifference in her bones that kept people 1,000 miles away. She was passionate in bed, but when she got out of bed, she could turn her back on people. Such a contradictory individual, thorny and mysterious. Such a person made people want to conquer her. In the end, Su Peijian still made 2 sets of breakfast. After all, she believed that if she didn't make 2 sets, she was afraid that Ling Jing would come to rob her. 2 sandwiches, 2 glasses of milk, and a salad. "Don't you feel bored eating this every day?" Ling Jing sat down at the table and stared at the sandwiches on the table. "Aren't you tired of it? Why don't we change it tomorrow?" Su Peijian didn't answer him. Once, at the dining table of the Su family, she only needed to say a word, and all kinds of Chinese and Western breakfast were placed on the table. She used to make Su Qinghui's heart ache for a long time with just a slight frown. She used to say a word casually, and Li Qianxue would prepare everything she wanted. However, no matter how good the food was, no matter how much she got, once she lost it, she would find that it was all fleeting clouds. Ling Jing looked at the indifferent expression on her face and was a little unhappy. Su Peijian, who was passionate in bed at night, was more likable. "It's snowing. How about we play after breakfast?" Su Peijian's reaction was to raise her head and look at him coldly, but then she didn't answer him at all. After breakfast, Su Peijian went into the study. She had made a lot of money recently, and the company was slowly starting to recover. Her ambition was not limited to that. She had a few feasible plans in her hands, and she planned to do them one by one. She had a lot of time, and living was boring. Other than occasionally accompanying Xiang Kaiping, she couldn't find anything else that could get her attention. Making money was one of them. Using the abilities she had learned from Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue to do these things made her have an illusion that she was still related to her past life. However, this time, her work didn't last long. Ling Jing came in. He was holding a glass of water in his hand. "Here. Leave it, I'm not thirsty." "You have to drink water even if you're not thirsty." Ling Jing put down the water and bent down to look at her. "The book says that people have to drink 8 glasses of water a day." Ling Jing looked at her with a faint smile on his face. When he smiled, his beautiful almond-shaped eyes would rise a little. "And I poured this glass of water myself." When had he, the young master of the Ling family, ever poured water for others? Even his old man and the Empress Dowager had never enjoyed such treatment. How dare this damned woman refuse? She really deserved to be taught a lesson. Su Peijian looked at the glass of water, and then looked up at Ling Jing. She didn't quite understand what he was doing. But it was only for a moment. Soon she understood. If he was unaccountably solicitous, he would either kill or steal. She had been giving him the cold shoulder recently. He probably had no money to spend, right? Sue Pasian had to work now, so she didn't think much. She took out her phone and clicked on a payment app. After a few swipes, finally, there was a transfer record of 100,000 yuan. Okay, you can go out now. She showed the page to Ling Jing. She felt that this should be enough to send him away. Unexpectedly, Ling Jing, who had a smile on her face, suddenly changed her expression. Ling Jing was angry. He had made a plan before to make Sue Pasian fall in love with him, and then dump her. So he condescended to pour water for her. How could he know that this damned woman didn't appreciate it, and thought that he was short of money? He was the young master of the Ling family. When had he ever been treated like this? Ling Jing's face turned green. Not only did he not leave, but he took a step forward. He reached out to pull Sue Pasian up, wanting to teach her a lesson. Sue Pasian ignored him. She turned to look at the computer screen, her fingers dancing nonstop. Sensing Ling Jing's approach, she turned her face and looked up at him. Get out. Woman, you really piss me off. Ling Jing didn't go out. Not only did he not leave, but he also pulled her up. Ling Jing, 100,000 yuan for a glass of water? Then shouldn't I do something more for you? Ling Jing had an absolute advantage in height and size. He picked her up and threw her onto the bed. Sue Pasian's body bounced twice. She wasn't hurt, but it made her unhappy. She didn't plan to go out, so she was naturally wearing pajamas. She just wanted to get up. But that person pressed on her again. Ling Jing, get out. How can I go out? Ling Jing was so angry that he laughed. You've already paid. I have to make you feel that it's worth it, right? I don't want to now. But I want to. Ling Jing lowered his head to bite her lips. It was a real bite with anger and venting. I want to. Ling Jing. The roles seemed to be reversed at this moment. Even if Sue Pasian tried her best to resist, she still couldn't escape in the end. Under the absolute strength advantage of the man, her resistance was not worth mentioning. Or she didn't want to resist. The two of them couldn't go out in the end, and Sue Pasian couldn't continue to complete her plan. Meeting a young boy like Ling Jing was very annoying. Her waist was about to break. That weekend, the two of them spent the rest of the time in bed, except for solving the basic physical needs. If it was the usual Sue Pasian, she would never give Ling Jing this opportunity. But right now, she really wanted to use these superficial pleasures to forget some things. After 2 days of fooling around, Sue Pasian forced herself to focus on work again. The snow in Rong City had already stopped, and the weather was clear. Sue Pasian also began her new round of career ambitions. When she got off work, she met a few clients. They were all old foxes. They talked for a long time, but they didn't give a definite answer. Sue Pasian understood the mentality of these people, so she simply withdrew her original attitude of wanting to cooperate. She postponed the date of the negotiation. She had learned all her business skills from Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui had always been about mutual benefit and win-win. She didn't think these old foxes would lose out. They refused to let go, just because they wanted more benefits. After talking for a long time, they couldn't reach an agreement. Sue Pasian was even unwilling to eat with this group of people. She ended the meeting directly. Because of meeting the clients, Sue Pasian, who got off work late, still chose to return to Rome Park. This was just a subconscious reaction. She knew in her heart that wanting to return to Rome City didn't mean anything. It was very relaxing to be with Ling Jing, not because she liked Ling Jing so much, but because she felt safe with Ling Jing's simple relationship. The current Ling Jing represented safety to her. Chapter 831. There was a smell of something burning in the air. Not only was there a burning smell, but there was also a smell that seemed to be burning. Sue Pasian quickly threw down her bag and rushed into the kitchen without even changing her shoes. The pot in the kitchen was already smoking. She didn't know what was cooking, but it was a black mass. Ling Jing's tall figure was standing in front of the pot, holding a bowl and pouring water into it. When the water entered the pot, it made a sizzling sound, but the smell was even stronger. What are you doing? Sue Pasian quickly stopped Ling Jing's action, stepped forward, turned off the fire, and then covered the pot. She quickly glanced around and found that the kitchen had become unrecognizable in the time she had been back from work. The cooking table was a mess, the ingredients were not cut properly, and the stains on the ground couldn't tell whether it was water or oil. Even the wall at the side was splashed with a lot of stains, not to mention the black thing in the pot, that he couldn't tell what it was. Ling Jing stood in front of the stove, wearing a white shirt, which was already a mess. He looked at her and smiled a little awkwardly. I am cooking. Cooking? Yes. Ling Jing nodded, and in a magnanimous manner, there was a bit of a look of asking for credit. I am cooking. I was going to cook for you. Su Peijian looked at the appearance of the kitchen, and then looked at the pot that was no longer smoking but still steaming. Are you sure you want to cook for me, not poison me? Inexplicably embarrassed, Ling Jing was a little uncomfortable. However, the awkwardness disappeared as quickly as it came. He was young Master Ling, the young master of the Ling family. With a sneer, he walked in front of Su Peijian. I want to poison you. Do I have to go through so much trouble? I just made a mistake. A mistake. Su Peijian looked at his face, which was a little arrogant, a little ruffian, and a little proud. She turned her face away speechlessly. Come out. Was she going to clean up by herself? Su Peijian glanced at the messy kitchen, and didn't intend to do it herself. She called Xiao Zhao to come over. When she was on the phone, her eyes swept around the kitchen again, and when she looked back at Ling Jing, she couldn't hide her disgust. Ling Jing is stimulated by her eyes, and goes forward to hold her waist. After she hung up the phone, he couldn't help but bite her on the cheek. Why are you looking at me like that? I told you it was a mistake. Don't you understand? Su Peijian tilted her head to look at him. She was unperturbed. If I remember correctly, there are a lot of delivery apps out there, right? Also, you can ask Xiao Zhao to come over and cook. No matter what, he wouldn't go to the extent of doing it himself. I already said that I'm cooking for you. Ling Jing seemed to be unconvinced. Isn't there a saying? Talk about capturing a man's heart. He had to grab this man's stomach first. Conversely, it should be the same for women, right? For the first time since Su Peijian walked in, she looked at this man seriously. There seemed to be a hint of flattery in the man's eyes. Considering their relationship, it was normal for him to please her. However, don't bother. I don't need this. Then what do you need? Ling Jing asked, almost subconsciously wanting to know. Su Peijian's mind went blank for a minute because of what he said. What did she need? I don't need anything. What she wanted would never come back in this lifetime. She was very clear. There will always be something that people want. I don't believe that you don't have it. Ling Jing's voice was lowered a little. He was already an evildoer. He deliberately lowered his voice and looked at her like this. If it were any other woman, she would definitely be tempted and would want to cling to him and not come down. However, Su Peijian was not any other woman. Ling Jing's problem was nothing more than a desire. She was now his sugar daddy, and he needed to please her. Let Xiao Zhao clean up the kitchen. Let's go. Where to? To eat. Su Peijian smelled the smell in the air and felt a little uncomfortable. You don't think I can still eat in such an environment, do you? Okay. I want to have a big meal. Su Peijian glanced at him and didn't refute. She knew that there was a very famous Western restaurant in Rong City. It was a chef from a Michelin star restaurant. Seeing that Ling Jing was trying so hard to please her, she decided to go there. The restaurant was in the center of Rong City. There was no vulgar restaurant with the same rotating pattern. However, it was indeed on the top floor, and all four sides were glass walls. The night was very cold, but the roof of Rong City had just snowed, and the ice and snow had not melted. Looking out from the window, under the neon lights, the snow became a little more romantic. After dinner, there were not many people in the restaurant. When Ling Jing entered the door, a manager inside saw him. His eyes widened, and he went forward to greet him. Ling Jing saw him and gave him a look. His eyes were very gloomy and cold. The manager's footsteps stopped there. Su Peijian followed Ling Jing's gaze to the manager, and found that his face was a little pale. Do you know him? No, Ling Jing answered quickly. It's my first time here. He lied without changing his expression, And Su Peijian did not doubt him. The two of them sat down by the window. The waiter came forward to deliver the menu. Su Peijian handed the menu to Ling Jing. There are a few signature dishes here that are well done. Their Italian food is quite authentic. She had been to Italy and tasted the authentic local cuisine. In comparison, the taste of this restaurant was really good. After the two of them ordered, the manager disappeared. Ling Jing breathed a sigh of relief. The game had not started yet. If someone recognized him, and Su Peijian found out, they would not be able to continue playing. The dishes were soon served. The moment Su Peijian picked up the knife and fork, she glanced at Ling Jing, and suddenly found that the other party's posture was very standard. She did not start eating, but just looked at Ling Jing for a while. Ling Jing raised his head under her gaze. "What's wrong? Have you learned Western food etiquette?" It was not unusual to have eaten Western food, but she could see that Ling Jing's movements were very standard. This kind of standard should not appear in such a gangster. Li Qianxue had specially hired a teacher to teach her etiquette, whether it was Western food or Chinese food etiquette. But Ling Jing, a little gangster, how could he have such a standard dining etiquette? "I haven't learned it." Ling Jing's hand holding the fork slightly tightened. When he met Su Peijian's puzzled gaze, he smiled. "The last rich woman I followed was a foreign girl. I learned it from her." He said it very lightly. Su Peijian frowned slightly. She did not like this topic, so she did not ask again. She quietly ate the food on the plate, but Ling Jing was looking at her. Her movements were very elegant. She was like the daughter of a big family. He had noticed it a long time ago, but now looking at her, wearing a simple business suit, sitting in this Western restaurant, it gave people the feeling that she was a princess, but a princess who was down and out. Ling Jing thought about his thoughts today. He originally wanted to move Su Peijian. This trick did not seem to work now. He could only think of other ways. Su Peijian did not know what Ling Jing was thinking. She enjoyed the rare relaxation in front of her. The similar taste of food reminded her of when she had traveled to Italy with Li Qianxue. Not only Italy, but she would travel with Li Qianxue every winter and summer vacation. They had been to many places. There was her. There was Su Yusen, the mother and son, from America to Europe, leaving their own footprints in many countries. Su Peijian's face was slightly pale as she stopped thinking. No matter how beautiful the memories were, they were all in the past that could not be returned. Ling Jing was sensitive to the fact that Su Peijian, who had been fine before going out, looked a little ugly after returning home after dinner. She went into the study almost as soon as she entered the door. He did not understand what went wrong, but at night, he tormented her slender body even more intensely. Since he could not think of other ways to please Su Peijian and make her fall in love with him, he would continue to let her indulge in his body and skills. Su Peijian was indeed particularly enthusiastic that night. It was said in books that when a woman's body was at its climax, it would go blank and forget to think. And such a short period of blankness was very suitable for her. Biting, scratching and entangling. As her consciousness soared, Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing's enchanting face. Yes, this man did have the capital to seduce people. At least, she was very satisfied with his body and skills. Her occasional absent-mindedness always caused Ling Jing deeper dissatisfaction. He bit down hard on her neck, making her completely immersed in it. She thought in a daze that it was still a little bad. Not obedient enough, not submissive enough. Next time, she must make it clear to him not to leave any traces on her body. No traces should be left. This was a typical kind of egoism. In a relationship, she did not want the other party to leave any traces, so that she could leave at any time. And would she be able to do as she wished? Only God knew. Su Peijian looked at herself in the mirror. Her complexion looked good. This week, she returned to Rome Garden every day. She worked hard during the day and relaxed at night. After a few days, although she occasionally felt tired, it did give people a much better feeling. In private, she was willing to admit that Ling Jing was a good bed partner. After all, a man with a good appearance and a good life could indeed make people feel satisfied and fully relaxed. However, that was all. Her heart was too empty, and she could only rely on the shallow happiness of her body to fill it. Her phone rang. It was Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping asked her to go home for the festival. Tomorrow was the Lantern Festival. Su Peijian realized that she hadn't been home for a few days. She did not refuse and promised Xiang Kaiping that she would go home for dinner. She decided to accompany her for 2 days. When she hung up the phone, Ling Jing came in. He saw her sitting in front of the dresser and put his arms around her waist. He had just brushed his teeth, and there was a faint mint smell on his body. He was not wearing a shirt, and his chest muscles were strong and muscular. Su Peijian was not in the mood to appreciate his deliberately showing off. These days, she had been crazy enough with Ling Jing. She pushed him away. She got up to get her clothes. These days, Ling Jing had been tossing and turning at night. It could be considered crazy. From the look in his eyes, she knew that he was up to no good. Su Peijian was not in the mood to do it again, so she gently pushed him away. "I'm going out. Get out of my way." She thought that she might need to rest. It was true that he looked good, but it was also true that his waist was sore. The man was in the prime of his life and full of energy. She really couldn't take it anymore. "Where are you going?" It was the weekend. Shouldn't they spend the day in bed? Ling Jing kissed her neck and hugged her again, not intending to let go. "Does it have anything to do with you?" Su Peijian said ruthlessly. She pushed him away without a care and got up to pick out clothes in front of the wardrobe. Ling Jing came forward again and locked her between the wardrobe and his chest. "How can it have nothing to do with me? It's such a good weekend, and the weather is good. Don't you think we can do something more interesting?" "I don't think so." She hadn't been home for several days. If she didn't go back, Xiang Kaiping would think too much. "But I think." Ling Jing lowered his head and wanted to kiss her again, but she avoided him. Her face darkened slightly. Obviously, she didn't like Ling Jing like this. "Ling Jing, I hope you understand that I have my own things to do. Get out of my way." "What if I don't?" Ling Jing looked at her half-open chest. The snow-white skin made his eyes darken a little. "What do you think?" Ling Jing was not the only one with a youthful and beautiful body. If he asked too much, or always liked to push his luck, Su Peijian believed that she would replace him without hesitation. Her eyes were slightly cold. Ling Jing stared at this woman and felt a toothache. In the past week, he could feel how passionate this woman was in bed. However, the more passionate she was in bed, the colder she was when she got out of bed. She was obviously the same person. How could she have two faces? They worked together seamlessly in bed. She was passionate, proactive, and sometimes even crazier than him. But it was only limited to bed. Once she got out of bed, this woman would immediately turn against him. Ling Jing stared at the cold expression on Su Peijian's face. He leaned over and bit her lips not too lightly or too heavily. He didn't use much force. Su Peijian was in pain and pushed him away. "Enough." Su Peijian didn't have much patience. "Move aside. I'm going to put on my clothes." She turned around and picked out the clothes to wear. She didn't avoid Ling Jing, who was standing beside her. She took off her nightgown and was about to put on her clothes. Ling Jing looked at her movements and became more and more angry. He threw the clothes in her hands aside and picked her up. "What? So heartless? You're going to throw me away after using me?" There was a trace of imperceptible anger in his tone. Su Peijian heard it, but she didn't understand. "Ling Jing, are you mistaken about something?" First, she hadn't thrown him away yet. Second, the two of them didn't seem to be in that kind of relationship. Before she could say anything else, Ling Jing had already thrown her onto the bed. "I didn't get anything wrong." He pressed down on her and restrained her hands and feet. "But if you want to leave today, you have to satisfy me first." Chapter 832. Ling Jing, let go of me. This time, Su Peijian's scolding didn't have any effect. There was a fire in Ling Jing's heart. An uncontrollable anger made his soul angry. "I'll let go of you when I'm done." In the end, Su Peijian wasn't stronger than Ling Jing and let him have his way. She heard him whisper, "Do it once. If you can get out of bed, I'll let you go." She closed her eyes and let him be. Ling Jing kept his promise and only did it once. The moment Su Peijian got off the bed, she clearly felt that her legs were weak, as if she could barely stand. She didn't look at Ling Jing. She didn't even think about cleaning herself up. She just cleaned up, put on her clothes and left. She made a decision in her heart. Ling Jing didn't know what to do. It seemed that she needed to give him the cold shoulder for a while. Ling Jing didn't expect that this damned woman could leave without hesitation after he worked so hard. Good. Really good. That was great. Damned woman, just you wait. Ling Jing's mind went through at least 100 ways to make that woman die. But in the end his stubbornness came back. He didn't believe that his invincible charm would be defeated by Su Peijian. And he didn't believe that that woman could always be cold. This way wouldn't work. He could take another way. If that woman easily took the bait and fell in love with him, what was the point? The more it was like this, the more challenging it would be. You don't love me? It's okay. I'll find a way to make you fall in love with me one day. I'm going to waste my time with you. I don't believe that I, the young master of the Ling family, can't handle a woman. Su Peijian will see. Su Peijian went home to spend the Lantern Festival with Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping wasn't good at business, but she lived a good life at home. She was good at cooking. She could cook some dishes from Lin City and Rong City. During the Lantern Festival, she suggested that she make the Lantern Festival herself. Su Peijian had never made it before. She wasn't interested in this kind of thing. However, she remembered that she had seen Xiang Kaiping and Su Qingsang making dumplings together on the surveillance camera. She didn't object to it. Instead, she was very interested in making dumplings with Xiang Kaiping. As it turned out, Su Peijian might have some talent in cooking. After breaking a few, she gradually got the hang of it. It looked quite presentable. Xiang Kaiping was very satisfied and liked it very much. It had just snowed, so Rong City was very cold. Outside, someone was not afraid of the cold and set off fireworks. Xiang Kaiping and Su Peijian sat together, the two of them, looking at the fireworks in the distance and eating sweet glutinous rice balls. The atmosphere at this moment was undoubtedly very good. He received 2 congratulatory messages on his phone. One was from Su Qinghui, and the other was from Su Yusin. Su Peijian glanced at them. After a moment of hesitation, she put down her phone without replying to any of them. The moment she went upstairs, Xiang Kaiping stopped her. She wanted to tell her about Mrs. Lin's son, but she saw a red mark on Su Peijian's neck. Peijian? Xiang Kaiping was experienced, especially when she used to live with Su Qingsang. From time to time, Su Qingsang would have these marks on her body. She knew very well how it came about. But where did the marks on Su Peijian's body come from? Did she have a boyfriend? But it didn't look like it. She wanted to say that Lin Feixing had come to her house twice. The first time for New Year's greetings, and the second time for a visit. But when her eyes swept over the mark, she couldn't say a word. Did Su Peijian have a boyfriend? Peijian, after New Year's, you'll be 1 year older. If there's a suitable one, you'll look everywhere. She had never been responsible for this daughter in the first half of her life, so she didn't have the confidence to say this. However, Xiang Kaiping was afraid that her daughter would always think about the past and refuse to look forward. I know. Su Peijian didn't like to talk about it. After making her stance clear, she went back to her room to rest. She didn't see Xiang Kaiping's hesitant expression. After the Lantern Festival, Su Peijian was busy again. Recently, the company had a joint online and offline promotion. After the planning department sent the plan to her, she approved it. Then, on a whim, when it was almost time to get off work, she decided to go to the retail store to have a look. The office was on the top floor, so she took the elevator down. When she passed the escalator, she saw a pair of familiar figures in the distance. Su Peijian's footsteps froze. After a second of shock, she quickly reacted and stood to the side, directly behind the pillar. Since Su Peijian was released from prison, her heart was beating so fast that it was beating so fast. She leaned against the pillar, and her breathing was a little erratic. A middle-aged couple passed by the pillar. The man was gentle and elegant, while the woman was elegant and noble. She had her back to them, but she could hear their conversation. Their voice was soft, but it was very familiar. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have forgotten to bring a gift. Li Qinshua's voice was slightly low, almost like a little girl's. It was the first time Su Peijian had heard it. Okay, it's all my fault. Su Qinghui admitted his mistake, his voice full of love. Since the two of them got back together, he wanted to bring the whole world to Li Qianxue. He spoiled Li Qianxue so much that Li Qianxue, who had always been elegant and calm, would show a little bit of a young woman from time to time. It's your fault. Li Qianxue gritted her teeth slightly, still feeling a little uncomfortable. This bastard, last night he said he would only come once, but what happened in the end? She didn't know how his age still had such good stamina. She almost couldn't get up this morning. The two of them rushed to the airport. In the end, Li Qianxue forgot to bring the gift that she was supposed to give to old Master Hua and the Hua family. It was the new year, so Li Qianxue was too embarrassed to come empty-handed, so she had to pick a new gift. Okay, don't be angry. The in-laws are all kind people, so they won't care about these empty gifts. They don't care, so you really have the nerve to come empty-handed? Li Qianxue couldn't help but stare at him again. Su Qinghui smiled and wrapped her hand in his palm. Then it's the same for us to pick now. It's fine as long as the intention is there. I believe the in-laws won't mind. I mind. Li Qianxue was a perfectionist, but she still felt a little depressed. She looked at Su Qinghui and added, "This time, I want to sleep with my daughter. You are not allowed to touch me again." The last sentence was said in a very low voice, and Su Qinghui's face changed. How could he do that? However, he thought of something and immediately smiled again. With the jealousy of his son-in-law, there was naturally a way to take his daughter away. He was not in a hurry. The voices of the two of them gradually became softer. Su Peixian didn't move. She just looked at their backs and listened to their conversation. Ever since she was a child, she had always known that the person Su Qinghui liked was not Li Qianxue. She had always thought that it was the same. Later she found out that it was not. Su Qinghui didn't know that his feelings were wrong for decades. When he found out, everything was turned upside down. She used to think that everything would never go back to the beginning. Everything was messed up, and life was intertwined. How could she go back to the beginning? However, now that she saw Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui, she suddenly realized something. The so-called things remain the same, but people have changed was just for her. For others, it was leading everything back on track. Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue were together in love. Su Qingsang became the daughter of the Su family and married into the Hua family as the wife of the president. It was as if everything had returned to the original and had never changed. However, her life had long changed beyond recognition, and she could never go back to the beginning. It turned out that she was the mistake. Wrong birth, wrong exchange. From beginning to end, her life seemed to have become a joke. How ridiculous and absurd was it? Su Peixian closed her eyes. Her heart, which had once been empty, was even emptier now. She looked at the crowd coming and going. It was very lively. There were couples, families, and sisters. She was the only one alone. Ling Jing took some time to deal with some business that he had to handle. He originally wanted to go back to the house, but for some reason, he went back to Rhone Garden. That woman didn't call him, nor did she send him a message. After leaving the day before yesterday, she went missing again. That damned woman, she really didn't take him seriously at all. He thought bitterly that he needed to come up with a plan to make that woman fall in love with him. He was going to go to that woman's place and look through all her secrets again. He didn't believe that he couldn't find that damned woman's weakness. He entered his fingerprint and entered the house. There was a smell of alcohol in the air. Ling Jing was stunned for a moment and looked at the woman sitting in the living room. She was wearing a Chanel suit, but at that moment, she was sitting on the ground without a care for her image. There were a few bottles of wine on the coffee table. 2 of them were already empty. He entered the house, but Su Peixian acted as if she didn't see him. She poured herself another glass of wine. She drank it in one gulp. Ling Jing could see that there was something wrong with this woman today. When he saw that Su Peixian was about to pour more wine, he stepped forward and snatched her glass away. "Give it to me." Her tone was gloomy, and her expression was cold. She was colder than the first time he met her. She was like a freezer, and within a 5-meter radius, there was only cold air released by her. "What's wrong? Something on your mind?" Ling Jing didn't want to give her the glass, So he wanted to find this woman's weakness. This woman was like this. TSK. Someone handed her a pillow when she wanted to sleep. Su Peijian's reaction was to glance at him, take the wine bottle, and drink it directly. Ling Jing was stunned for a moment. Then he tried to snatch the wine bottle from Su Peijian's hand again. Are you crazy? Drinking like this? Do you want to die drunk? All the wine on the table was hard liquor. Does it have anything to do with you? Su Peijian looked at him, as if she was looking at an object. Ling Jing gritted his teeth, put the wine bottle and glass heavily on the coffee table, and pulled her up. He held her waist and stared at her face gloomily. Chapter 833. It has nothing to do with you. Go away. Su Peijian pushed him away forcefully, took a step back, and fell onto the sofa. She went for the wine again. Ling Jing grabbed his hand, and he pulled her up again. Didn't I tell you? How can it have nothing to do with me? Ling Jing grabbed her tightly, not giving her a chance to break free. A day as husband and wife means 100 days of love. We've slept together for so many days. What? You can't tell me? Husband and wife. Gratitude. Su Peijian looked as if she had heard a joke. Her eyes were full of mockery. And because of the alcohol, her face was very red. At this moment, she was in a bad mood and did not want to suppress her emotions. She raised her hand and gently tapped Ling Jing's chest. What are you talking about? You're here to talk about gratitude? Aren't you just a gigolo? I don't want to see you now, and I don't want to talk to you either. Get lost. Ling Jing has never been disgraced by anyone in his life. It was Su Peijian who had humiliated him over and over again. He was so angry that he lowered his head to kiss her. Su Peijian was so angry that she raised her hand to slap him, but someone grabbed her hand. Su Peijian tried a few times, but failed to pull her hand back. I'll say it again, get lost. I don't want to see you. Ling Jing grabbed Su Peijian's hand and couldn't hide the anger on his face. Damn woman. She didn't know when she first came. But now she wanted to slap him? But this woman, this damned woman. They had repeatedly challenged his bottom line. He grabbed her arm tightly and made her look at him. That's enough. Su Peijian, who provoked you? Why don't you attack the person who provoked you? Why are you attacking me? Fine, you don't dare to make a move, do you? Tell me who provoked you, and I'll help you teach that person a lesson. Tell me. Su Peijian finally looked Ling Jing in the eye. Ling Jing, get lost. Ling Jing was furious. He had never been so angry in his life. This woman simply didn't know how to appreciate kindness. He grabbed her hand and led her outside. Su Peijian was dragged by him. She staggered and almost fell. She tried hard to pull her hand away, but the difference between men and women was reflected at this moment. She couldn't pull it away. What are you doing? Let me go. She wanted to kick him, but that would make her body lose balance. With alcohol and anger, her voice was a notch higher than usual. Ling Jing, you bastard, let me go. Ling Jing directly dragged her out of the door. Before going out, she did not forget to take Xianguan's coat. As soon as she stepped out of the door and lost the protection of the heater, Su Peijian's body shrank. Ling Jing threw the down jacket on her. Ling Jing, you lunatic. Su Peijian wanted to enter the door again, but Ling Jing did not give her a chance. He closed the door and led her to the direction of the elevator. Woman, do you want to get drunk? What was the point of getting drunk? Come on. If you want to drown your sorrows in alcohol, why don't I bring you to play something more exciting? Lunatic. The moment Su Peijian stepped into the elevator, she shook off his hand and took a step back. Who says I'm drowning my sorrows in alcohol? I just want a drink. Really? Ling Jing took a step forward and stood in front of her. She stared at her face and her eyes were full of malice. Since that's the case, do you dare to go with me? I promise that my method is 100 times more effective than letting you simply drink. Su Peijian did not want to talk to him at all. After drinking, the wind blew, and she was about 50 to 60% sober. She put on the down jacket, looked at Ling Jing coldly, and pressed the elevator button. Get out of the way, I want to go back. Ling Jing completely ignored her. The elevator went down to the underground parking lot, and he grabbed her wrist and led her to his car. Sure enough, It was the familiar Cadillac that had been parked here for a long time. After getting into the car, Sue Payson stopped running. She seemed to be sober but not sober. She seemed to be drunk but not drunk. The emptiness in her heart was still there, and the feeling of her body was still there. The feeling of loss, emptiness, and the discomfort of her life being turned upside down was still there. She closed her eyes and emptied her mind. She did not see, did not listen, did not feel. The car drove out of the underground parking lot like an arrow. In such cold weather, the black shadow of the car shuttled through the streets and alleys of Rome City. Sue Payson felt it, but she did not open her eyes. The car stopped, and she still closed her eyes. The person beside her got out of the car, but she did not move. Being drunk was also a way to numb oneself, and emptying one's mind was also a way to numb oneself. She was fearless. Without people and things to care about, the heart would become unprecedentedly strong, and it would also become extremely empty and lost. There seemed to be a lot of voices around her, but she did not open her eyes. She was not curious, nor did she care. She did not want to know where Ling Jing brought her, and what he brought her here for. About 10 minutes passed, or maybe 20. The car door on her side was opened, and the cold wind poured in. Her body instinctively shrank. In the next second, she was dragged out of the car. She finally opened her eyes, and finally saw the environment she was in. There were more than one mountain in Rome City. She knew this place, but she had never been there. There were many people standing on both sides of the winding mountain road. These people were not afraid of the cold on such a cold day. There were men and women, and it was very noisy. Those voices had been blocked out by her just now, so she could hear them clearly now. She felt that it was noisy and instinctively frowned. However, she was led forward by Ling Jing. There were many cars lined up neatly in front of them. At a glance, all of them were luxury cars. Ferrari, Lamborghini, Maybach, Porsche, Aston Martin, Bugatti Veyron. When Ling Jing held Sue Payson's hand and entered the car, someone blew a whistle. Ling Jing glanced over, and the man made a zipping motion with his mouth. Soon, someone came over and put a car key in Ling Jing's hand. Ling Jing glanced at Sue Payson and asked, "Are you afraid?" Sue Payson's state at this moment was empty, and her thoughts were also empty. Ling Jing's words made her come back to her senses a little, but she gave him a cold look. There was no trace of emotion in her extremely cold eyes. It seemed to be saying, "Why would I, Sue Payson, be afraid? It's good that you're not afraid." Ling Jing took the car key and walked to one of the white Aston Martin. He opened the door and gestured for Sue Payson to get in. Sue Payson finally had a little emotional reaction. She looked at Ling Jing, and then at the mountain road in front of her. She retracted her gaze and met Ling Jing's eyes. "You want to play this?" "Yes. Do you dare to get in?" Sue Payson glanced at him, and her eyes were still empty. There was no emotion in them, and there was no emotion. She opened the car door and got in. Ling Jing also got in the car. The noise around them seemed to have gotten even louder. Whistles, jeers, and cheers could be heard everywhere. People got into the cars around them one after another. The sound of the engine continued. Sue Payson glanced at Ling Jing. He didn't take any protective measures, and neither did she. "Woman, if I win today, this car will be mine." Ling Jing suddenly approached her and stared into her eyes. "Do you think I can win?" Sue Payson refused to answer such a question. She was still in a state of refusing to receive any information at this time. Ling Jing didn't give up, and moved closer to her. At the same time, he fastened her seat belt. "Tell me, do you think I can win today?" "No." Sue Payson didn't intend to save Ling Jing's face at all. Ling Jing looked at Sue Payson, who looked as if her soul had flown out of her body, and nodded. Ling Jing knew that she was not sober yet, but he wanted Sue Payson to be half drunk like this. "Okay. If I don't win today, I'm not Ling Jing." Sue Payson didn't look at him at all. Her eyes swept forward. On such a cold day, there was also a girl dressed very skimpily standing there. She waved two small flags in her hands. People kept whistling and cheering. The girl stood on the side and waved the small flag in her hand vigorously. The roar of the engine continued, and the car drove away like an arrow. Before Sue Payson could react or prepare, the car had already rushed out toward the mountain road. Her body fell back because of such a momentum. Even if Su Peijian didn't want to, even if she kept forcing herself to empty her mind, it didn't work. The car kept moving forward and constantly accelerating. In extreme speed, it was easy for people to feel weightless. Not to mention that they were on a mountain road now. Every turn and every acceleration would make people feel uncomfortable. Su Peijian, who was originally in a daze, had to return to her body. She watched Ling Jing drive the car skillfully overtaking one car after another. She could drive herself, but she never drove fast. One was habit. Whether it was Su Qinghui or Li Qianxue, they were both people who followed the rules and cherished their lives. She was the same. Some habits were inherited. Right now the car seemed to be flying toward the top of the mountain. The winding mountain road was full of curves and narrow roads. Su Peijian pressed her body tightly against the car seat behind her. She turned to look at Ling Jing. But at this moment, Ling Jing was no longer the person she had thought he was. His eyes were like a cheetah in the dark, or like a goshawk on a cliff. She knew that since the Speed series of movies became popular in China, many people liked the feeling of speeding like this. Everyone thought that they were Paul or Vin Diesel. But in fact, not everyone could be Paul or Vin Diesel. Su Peijian's body was very uncomfortable. She didn't like this feeling at all. She wanted to speak, but the car drove past a bend at this moment. A car behind them was about to catch up. She saw Ling Jing's calm face. He didn't look back at all, stepped on the accelerator, and turned the steering wheel. Su Peijian thought that she was flying, and the car was almost flying. But it fell again. The sudden feeling of weightlessness wasn't good. Not to mention that the car was still moving forward, rushing forward. Ling Jing, are you crazy? The mountain road was not steep, but it was definitely not flat. The car kept rushing forward, and Su Peijian almost wanted to rush down the mountain with her. Ling Jing, stop right there. Chapter 834. Ling Jing wanted to die, but she didn't. Su Peijian was about to lose her temper. The drunkenness caused by the wine she had drunk before was gone. Ling Jing had completely ignored her at this time. In such an environment, a slight distraction would cause them to lose. There was a relatively large empty field at the top of the mountain. They turned here and went down the mountain. They would only win if they finished the whole journey. However, when they went down the mountain, there would still be cars on the mountain road. It would be chaos, and there would be danger at any time. Su Peijian didn't know who came up with this idea. She didn't notice it before. But now that she had calmed down, she saw that Ling Jing was driving the car in the middle of the traffic. Su Peijian, who had always been calm and composed, finally couldn't control her expression. Ling Jing, stop, do you hear me? This was the road going downhill. More importantly, the mountain road was so narrow. It felt like the two cars would fall at any time, especially when there was a car going up in front of them. But they were going down. When they were about to collide with their car, Su Peijian's drunkenness was completely awakened. Ling Jing, are you crazy? Stop. He was driving so fast just now, and there were still several cars coming up from behind. Compared to them, Ling Jing's car seemed to be going in the wrong direction. There was no response. Ling Jing looked at the car in front of him with a playful and unruly smile on his face. Even if it was going downhill, he was still stepping on the accelerator. Su Peijian felt the car continue to dive, and the feeling of weightlessness made her uncomfortable. She had also played some extreme sports, such as skydiving, bungee jumping, and when she was abroad, she had also played in hot air balloons and hang gliding. However, those were all when she was prepared, and there was a coach beside her with standard operation and guidance, which made her feel at ease. This Ling Jing in front of her was simply messing around. In the end, Su Peijian couldn't stand it anymore. She pressed her body against the car seat, raised her hand to grab the seat belt tightly, and closed her eyes. She felt her body continue to go down and down with the car. After an unknown period of time, the car finally stopped. It was very noisy, and she could hear the noise through the car door. There were whistles and cheers and a lot of noise. Su Peijian naturally didn't like such an environment. She sat in the car and tried her best to endure the discomfort she had just experienced. We're here. The sound in her ears made her feel real. and she was really sure that the bastard Ling Jing had stopped the car. Her legs were a little weak, and the noise around her made her face even paler. Ling Jing unbuckled her seatbelt and turned around to look at her. There was an arrogant smile on her face. First, how was it? My skills are not bad, right? With a paw sound, Ling Jing's face was slapped. His eyes widened as he stared at Su Peijian. His good mood from winning the competition had completely dissipated. He pointed at Su Peijian, his eyes almost spitting fire. You damned woman, how dare you hit me? That's exactly what I'm going to do. Su Peijian's drunkenness had completely dissipated. Withdrawing from the feeling of almost facing death, she stared at the person in front of her. Ling Jing, it's your own business if you want to die. I don't want to die. After saying this, she got out of the car without looking back. The night wind was extremely cold. Su Peijian pulled her clothes closer to her body. She didn't even look at the gazes on her, nor did she look at the people around her. She walked directly through the crowd and went outside. Ling Jing got out of the car with a slap mark on his face. If it weren't for the fact that it was too late at night, others would definitely be able to see it. Some people recognized him and wanted to come over to say hello, but they were all blocked by his cold eyes. Su Peijian walked very fast. She was dragged out by Ling Jing, and she was wearing the high heels she had worn to work today. Even so, she couldn't delay her footsteps at all. She walked very fast. The people behind her gradually became farther and farther away. Slowly, she walked to the road outside the mountain road. The night wind blew, and her feet gradually gained strength. She had regained her senses. The Cadillac stopped beside her. Ling Jing got out to take her hand. Get in the car. Su Peijian looked at him coldly, her eyes still without the slightest emotion. Ling Jing really lost her temper because of this woman. I said get in the car. Su Peijian didn't hesitate too much. It was windy here, and it was far from the city. She didn't have the tendency to self-abuse. After getting in the car, she didn't even look at Ling Jing. There won't be a next time. Ling Jing glanced at her and started the car. Considering Su Peijian's pale face just now, he drove very slowly this time. Don't you think it's very exciting? Su Peijian didn't respond to his words at all. Exciting? It was indeed exciting. When she thought that Ling Jing's car was about to collide with another car, her heart almost stopped. At that moment she thought that she would die, but it was at that moment that she suddenly realized that she didn't want to die. Not at all. Even if her life was a joke, even if she could no longer go back to the past. But she still didn't want to die. She wanted to live. She wanted to live well. Escape was an emotion that only the weak would have. She was Su Peijian. She wouldn't escape. You have to admit that my method worked, right? Ling Jing's words made her come back to her senses. She glanced at him coldly. She retracted her gaze and looked at the streets on both sides of the road. When she passed by a certain place, she suddenly stopped the car. Ling Jing stopped the car and looked at Su Peijian, not quite understanding what she wanted to do. Su Peijian sat in the car and looked across the road. This was a night market street in Rong City. She rarely went there. The weather was too cold. At night, there were almost no people here. However, a small stall at the end of the street was still open. There were only 4 words on the sign, Shi's Wonton. There was a couple in the shop. They were cleaning up. It seemed that they were closing the stall. Su Peijian kept staring at the couple. She watched them clean up the tables outside. She watched the woman sweep away the trash outside and go back inside to clean up. She watched very seriously and very attentively, but it seemed that she was looking elsewhere. Ling Jing naturally saw it too. He looked at Su Peijian's expression and didn't understand why she was staring at a roadside stall for so long. Hungry? Have you eaten? Why don't we go now? What do you want to eat? Su Peijian didn't look at him. In the shop, the man had already gone to the kitchen in the back, and the woman returned to the counter. She watched for a while, then suddenly opened the door and got out of the car. The night wind was very cold. She tightened her coat and walked to the wonton shop. Sister Shi, little Su. The woman inside was about to close the stall. When she saw Su Peijian, her eyes lit up. Why are you here? How did you know that I have a shop here? I haven't seen you for a long time. How are you? How have you been? Soup Asian didn't answer her series of questions. I'm hungry. Soup Asian looked at the old but clean shop in front of her. She picked a seat and sat down. Sister Sure, cook a bowl of wonton for me. Okay. What kind of fillings do you want? Anything. Soup Asian was not gloomy and cold like before. Make whatever you want. Okay. Sister Sure entered the shop to cook the wonton. However, she saw Ling Jing, who followed her in. Dear customer, we're closing. She wanted to have a good chat with Soup Asian. Isn't she here too? Ling Jing glanced at Soup Asian. She's my friend. Dear customer, I'm also her friend. As she spoke, Ling Jing walked to Soup Asian and sat down in front of her. Sister Sure glanced at Soup Asian. Seeing that she didn't refute, she asked, Sir, what kind of fillings do you want? Anything is fine. I'll eat whatever she eats. Sister Sure didn't ask anymore. She went into the kitchen and said something. A man's voice could be heard from inside the kitchen. Sister Sure took out the utensils and placed them on the table. Little Sue, do you want some wine? Or a drink? Give me a bottle of water. Soup Asian had just drunk some wine, so she didn't feel like drinking anymore. Okay. Sister Sure took the wine away. She brought 2 bottles of water over. Little Sue, how have you been lately? This is the first time I've seen you since you came out. I've really missed you. I just don't know where to find you. Pretty good. Soup Asian's tone was indifferent, without much enthusiasm. She had always been like this, so Sister Sure wasn't angry. I really have to thank you back then. If it wasn't for you. Sister Sure, let's not talk about the past. Yes. It's all in the past. Let's not talk about it. Sister Sure glanced at Ling Jing. She thought that Soup Asian was too embarrassed to talk about it, so she didn't say anything. But she couldn't help it. It was fate that they could meet people like them. Is this your boyfriend? Was there a palm print on this man's face? Maybe she saw it wrong. It was the wind. No. Soup Asian's voice was indifferent. A friend. Sensing that Ling Jing's expression wasn't too good, Soup Asian didn't want to pay attention to her. She just looked at Sister Sure and asked, How's Sister Sure recently? You look good. It's not bad. After I came out, I told my husband and opened this shop. Business is good. It's close to the school. So many students come here to eat. Okay. Soup Asian drank the water and replied lightly, That's good. She wasn't very enthusiastic, but she didn't stop Sister Sure from continuing. She was in the mood again. I miss you guys so much. I even went back to visit them once. After Xiao Zhao came out, I heard that he went back to his hometown. That Zhang Hong divorced her husband. Now she's living alone with her child. And that Sister Zhou. She didn't speak quickly. Soup Asian was a little confused and a little lost. In the past 2 years, she, the daughter of a rich family, had met many people. They were people that she wouldn't have crossed paths with in the first half of her life. She never thought that one day she would sit in such a small roadside shop and eat such ordinary wontons. Sister Sure's husband had already cooked the wontons. She called out from inside, and Sister Sure answered, and went to serve the wontons. She brought out 2 big bowls on a tray. They had just come out of the pot, and were still steaming. Soup Asian looked at the bowl of wontons with chopped green onions floating on top. She didn't eat green onions in the past. Not only did she not eat green onions, but she also didn't eat many things. The Su family's chef knew that every time she didn't like it, he would specially pick it out. But ever since she went in, she realized that there was no such thing as eating or not eating. But it wasn't to that extent. A place like prison wouldn't care about your thoughts and feelings. She could only adapt and get used to it by herself. She picked up the spoon beside her, scooped up a wonton, and slowly put it into her mouth without looking at Ling Jing. The taste was average, not as good as the ones made by the chef at home. But at this moment, she felt that it was very delicious. On a cold night like this, when she thought she was going to die, but then she came back to life. How is it? Although Sister Sure knew that Soup Asian was like her, she also knew that she was different from her. She could tell from her time in prison that she was a cultured person. She was educated and had a good temperament. She looked at Soup Asian nervously, afraid that she would say that it wasn't delicious. It's very delicious. Soup Asian smiled at Sister Sure, and didn't say anything else. She didn't have the habit of talking while eating. Ling Jing didn't say anything. He just looked at Su Peijian. Looking at her sitting in such a simple shop, it gave people the feeling that they were in a certain five-star hotel. He didn't need to ask. He could guess the relationship between the two, just by listening to what the woman said. Cellmate. TSK. He didn't expect this woman to be so open about her past after she was released. Also, she brought him here so openly. Wasn't she afraid that he would have other reactions? Sister Sure smiled and went to the kitchen. After a while, she brought out 2 plates of braised food. Little Su, try this. It's homemade. She was still a little careful, knowing that Su Peijian was different from them. Now that she looked at it again, it confirmed her guess. She was from a different world from them. Thank you. Su Peijian didn't usually eat these. She didn't like eating animal organs. But looking at the chicken gizzards on the plate, she picked up a piece and put it in her mouth without frowning. Looking at Sister Sure's expectant face, Su Peijian said again after swallowing the food, "It's very delicious. Thank you, Sister Sure. I'm glad you like it. Eat more if you like it." There weren't many people in the wonton shop. Su Peijian and Ling Jing didn't say a word. After eating, Su Peijian thought about how much money she had to spend. Only then did she remember that she was dragged out by Ling Jing like this. She didn't have her phone or wallet on her. She turned to look at Ling Jing. Ling Jing pretended not to understand. Su Peijian reached out. Seeing that Sister Sure wasn't paying attention, Ling Jing approached her. "What? Are you my sugar daddy? Why do you need me to pay for a meal? I'll pay you back tenfold when we get back." Su Peijian's lowered voice was full of coldness. "If 10 times isn't enough, will 100 times be enough? Of course not." Ling Jing leaned close to her ear. "Personally, I'm more inclined to let you repay the debt in another way. What do you think?" The hint in his eyes was too obvious. Su Peijian stared at his jacket expressionlessly. Suddenly, she reached out her hand to take her wallet. Ling Jing avoided her, took out his wallet, got up, and put a red bill on the table. Sister Sure saw it and quickly came out. "You don't have to give it to me. Look at you. I'm very happy that you're willing to come to my place. Take it." Su Peijian's voice was very soft. "It's not easy for you to do business." Seeing that Sister Sure was about to push the money over, Su Peijian pressed her hand. "Sister Sure, you really don't have to be so polite." She withdrew her hand and wanted to leave. When she passed by the counter, she saw a pen and paper on it. After thinking for a moment, she picked it up and wrote a string of numbers. She turned around and handed it to Sister Sure. "Sister Sure, this is my number. If you need anything in the future, you can call me." "Hey, you child." Sister Sure looked at the string of numbers, and her face was filled with many emotions. "Look at you. I'm fine now, don't worry. But I'll definitely keep this number. Come often when you're free." This was a polite sentence. She knew that a person of Su Peijian's status wouldn't come to such a small shop often. What happened today was probably an accident. "Goodbye, Sister Sure." Su Peijian didn't say much. When she saw Sister Sure's man coming out of the back kitchen, she nodded and left without looking back. After getting into the car, Su Peijian nestled herself in the seat. She looked outside. The sky was very gloomy, and it seemed that it was going to snow again. She used to like snow in Lin City. In order to see the snow, she followed Li Qianxue to Canada, Finland, and Iceland. They also went to Switzerland to specialize in skiing. She still remembered that they lived in an igloo near the ski resort in Switzerland. In order for her to live comfortably, Li Qianxue booked an entire floor. Every day, she would wake up naturally, and then go skiing with Su Yusen and Li Qianxue. They would take the cable car to see the scenery of the snowy mountains. It snowed in Rong City every year. After seeing it twice in prison, she realized that there was actually nothing to see in the snow. What could make people feel beautiful were people. It was the people who were by her side at that time. Ling Jing looked at her, and wasn't in a hurry to start the car. He turned around and moved closer to her. "Can't bear to? Do you want to go in and sit for a while?" Su Peijian turned her face to look at him and said expressionlessly, "Drive." "What? Are you ordering me around as a chauffeur again? Let me tell you, I can charge a lot." "Shut up." Su Peijian didn't want to listen to him now. But Ling Jing insisted. He moved closer to Su Peijian, put his arms around her waist, and pressed their foreheads together. I'll shut up if you tell me to. Wouldn't that be too embarrassing for me? Are you driving or not? Yes. Ling Jing bit her lips lightly. Looking at the blush on the woman's face, he stepped back. Woman, remember, you owe me twice. Su Peijian ignored him. She just stared out of the car window. Back at Rome Garden, Su Peijian went to take a shower. In the middle, Ling Jing squeezed into the bathroom. Regardless of her cold face, he directly pressed her down and messed around in the bathtub. Su Peijian was tormented by him a lot. When she came out of the bathroom, she thought that it was the end, but the man didn't even give her time for daily maintenance. He carried her to the bed, lowered his waist, and began another negative distance contact. You owe me this. The man's voice was low and husky, revealing a different kind of sex. She actually didn't eat much after 7 o'clock in the evening. After eating a bowl of wontons just now, she was indeed full. It was rare that she didn't stop Ling Jing from messing around. She thought about the trace of fear that she almost died today, and the trace of joy that came from surviving the disaster. She closed her eyes and let Ling Jing do whatever he wanted. The man had an outstanding figure, and was in the prime of his life. There seemed to be a passion in his young body that would never diminish. Little by little, again and again. She closed her eyes because she didn't want to give the other party a reaction, but the man was not satisfied with that. He used all means and effort to make her respond to him. Maybe it was the stimulation during the day, or maybe it was the stimulation at night. The moment the man bit her neck, Su Peijian was enraged. She opened her eyes and looked at the man's upturned phoenix eyes. She stretched out her long legs and pressed the man under her body, taking the initiative. Ling Jing was stunned for a moment. Before she could react, the woman had already lowered her waist. The woman was on top, and the man was below. Everything was reversed. But it was a different kind of excitement. The night was long. Her biological clock woke Su Peijian up on time. However, she couldn't get up. Yesterday, the bastard man used the name of collecting debts to press her down and beg her again and again. Later, she was so angry that she turned the tables and pressed the man under her body. She thought that the other party would give up, but she didn't know what she had done to provoke the man. Not only was the man very cooperative, but he also insisted that she continue like this. She usually exercised and her physical strength wasn't bad, but in the end she still lost. After all, the upper position was really a test of the body's condition. Her hands were a little sore, not to mention her waist and legs. She couldn't help but frown. Just when she wanted to get up, she found herself tightly in the man's arms. The man's hand was on her waist, and his wheat-colored arm was strong and strong. She lowered her head and looked at the arm, and for a moment she was dazed. The man's chest and her back were tightly pressed together. There was almost no gap. No man had ever hugged her to sleep like this. This position, from a psychological point of view, was a protective position. The man was hugging her like this, not below her. From a psychological point of view, the man wanted to protect her? Ha! How ridiculous. She didn't need his protection. She didn't need anyone's protection. She closed her eyes, removed the man's hand and got up. The moment her hand was removed, Ling Jing woke up. He looked at Su Peijian, who was about to get up, turned over, and pressed her under his body again. You can still get up? Get out of the way, Su Peijian said expressionlessly. I want to go to work. What's wrong with going to work? Your company won't collapse even if you rest for a day. I said get out of the way. No. Ling Jing lay on him, using both hands and feet. The weather is good today. Let's go play. Ling Jing. Don't forget, you still owe me one. Su Peijian sneered, and her gorgeous face was frosty. I remember we did it more than once yesterday. Are you complimenting me? Thank you for the compliment. What a shameless man. He could talk about anything. Su Peijian didn't want to talk to him anymore. She reached out to push him, but he grabbed her hand. He sat up and pointed at his face. You remember what you did yesterday, don't you? It was too late, and no one could see the slap mark at the time. Otherwise, how could he, the dignified young master of the Ling family, put his face? Woman, No one has ever dared to slap me in my life. Really? Then I'm glad I'm the first. TSK. Ling Jing pulled her body up and held her in his arms again. Don't you think you need to compensate me? Is 500,000 enough? I'll give it to you later. After Su Peijian finished speaking, she was about to get out of bed. Ling Jing was annoyed. He buckled her waist, and their naked bodies were pressed together again. He lifted her chin and made her look into his eyes, clearly expressing his dissatisfaction. Chapter 835. The rascally look on Ling Jing's face made Su Peijian frown. She tried, but she didn't push him away. She looked at him coldly, and there wasn't even a trace of emotion in her tone. Does it have anything to do with me? Did I ask you to pick me up? And if you don't take me there, will I be there? Women. Ling Jing was so angry that he lowered his head and bit her neck. I tell you, you have to pay it back today. Even if you don't want to pay it back, you have to pay it back. Otherwise, hugging Su Peijian, he spun her around and said in a threatening tone, I don't mind making it so that you can't get out of bed. Lunatic. Su Peijian tried to push him away, but how could she compete with the man's strength? He restrained her limbs, not letting her escape. He looked down at her face with a slight smile on his face. What do you think? Do you admit defeat? Are you going to let go or not? Aren't you going to return it? Su Peijian took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. She stared at Ling Jing's long and narrow eyes, and there was a hidden anger in her voice. What exactly do you want? You owe me twice, so accompany me for 2 days. That's not too much, right? I said I have to go to work. Don't worry. If you don't work for a day, I'll collapse, and the company won't be able to operate anymore. Su Peijian narrowed her eyes slightly and looked at the rascally look on Ling Jing's face. Who told you that I run a company? Her bright eyes were filled with sharpness. Even though she was being suppressed by him, her aura did not diminish. Do I even need someone to tell me this? Ling Jing leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. Her expression was as light as ever. You took 2 million yuan in one breath to cover me for half a year. Don't tell me you're just an ordinary white-collar worker. Su Peijian glanced at him. Can you let go of me first? No. Ling Jing was very rascally. You pay the debt first. If it was before yesterday, Su Peijian would have kicked this man until he couldn't take care of himself. Thinking back to yesterday when this madman dragged her to crash a car and almost caused a car accident, although her voice was still cold, she did not struggle anymore. How do you want to pay me back? Let me say this first, I'm not going out. It was too cold outside. Even though she was used to the temperature in Rome City, she still didn't like the dry feeling of the wind blowing on her face. I won't go out then. How about you stay at home with me for a day? Childish. Su Peijian resisted the urge to beat the man up. I'm still very uncomfortable if we don't have sex. Her legs were weak and her waist was sore. She really didn't want to do it again. Okay, as long as you accompany me for a day. Ling Jing seemed to be very happy that she had achieved her goal. He smiled with a faint smile on his face. When he smiled, his eyes were very bright. They were clearly red phoenix eyes, but there was not a trace of femininity in them. It only made people feel that this person's smile was... She thought of a word to describe a man's smile. Su. Ling Jing's smile did give people the feeling that she was quite cheerful. She tapped his chest, motioning for him to release her. Knowing that she would not run away today, Ling Jing got up and turned to hold her waist. You promised to accompany me all day today. You are very annoying. If you scold me again, I'll press you down and do it again. No, one more day. Su Peijian had no intention of continuing this crazy argument with him. She got up and tidied herself up. She was too lazy to cook, so she called Xiao Zhao to send breakfast over. She didn't really like to eat takeout, although she could accept some of the requirements in life. But she also had her own insistence. Xiao Zhao arrived very quickly with a Chinese-style breakfast from a 5-star hotel. Su Peijian sat together with Ling Jing for breakfast. The man's eyes were fixed on her. Even if she tried to ignore it, she still felt a sense of uneasiness. What are you looking at? I'm looking at you. Ling Jing stopped eating. I'm looking at how beautiful you are. Crazy. Su Peijian lowered her head and ignored this guy. Ling Jing was very interested. Say, you are so beautiful. Why don't you go find a serious boyfriend? Was he still thinking about that Hua guy? TSK. What kind of taste was that? Su Peijian took his words as a hint. She looked up at him expressionlessly. The agreement between us doesn't seem to include that you have the right to interfere in my affairs. How is this interfering? I am just curious and want to ask. Can I? Su Peijian put down the milk in her hand and leaned back slightly. What about you? You are so young, but you don't want to find a good job. Do you want to be someone's toy boy? Ling Jing was speechless. She was the one who suggested it, okay? He stopped talking, and Su Peijian got some peace and quiet. After breakfast, she wanted to go to the study, but Ling Jing pulled her to sit on the sofa in the living room. Didn't you say you will accompany me? Then you are not allowed to deal with business. Not at all. Su Peijian glanced at him. What do you want? I want you to accompany me. By accompany, you mean just sitting here. Then watch TV. Ling Jing turned on the TV as he spoke. I wanted you to accompany me to watch a movie outside, but you said you don't want to go out. There was a screening room in the Li family's villa. She could watch whatever she wanted at home. In such a small apartment, naturally, only the TV could be watched. Ling Jing held her in one hand and held the remote control in the other. He casually changed a few channels, but they were all melodramatic or palace dramas. Su Peijian was the first to not watch it, not to mention Ling Jing. Watch this. The remote control in Ling Jing's hand stopped. Su Peijian looked at the screen. It was actually Cherry Maruko. She glanced at Ling Jing with an indescribable disdain in her eyes. Why are you looking at me like that? Don't look down on cartoons. You look like you're half dead, so you should take a look at Cherry Maruko-chan. Crazy. Su Peijian wanted to get up from his arms. If you want to watch it, you watch it. I won't watch it. Don't be like this. Haven't you heard of it? As long as you are alive, you will definitely encounter good things. Don't you think it's very inspirational and chicken soup? In fact, Ling Jing had never read Cherry Maruko, but some time ago, the author of the comic seemed to have passed away. There was a news report, so he casually glanced at it. He didn't read the main content seriously, but he remembered that sentence. Su Peijian's face finally showed some expression. She turned her face to look at Ling Jing with a hint of mockery in her eyes. The so-called chicken soup is for those who are not strong-willed. The truly strong don't need chicken soup at all. That makes sense. Ling Jing nodded and placed the remote control in Su Peijian's hand. Then you choose. What do you want to watch? Su Peijian glanced at him, thought for a moment, and took the remote control. Ling Jing didn't expect Su Peijian to watch The Shawshank Redemption. He couldn't help but glance at her, but Su Peijian didn't look at him. She just fixed her gaze on the screen. It was a very heavy movie, and there was almost no fun to speak of. From the beginning, it was a heavy tone, a gray prison and a gray sky. But there seemed to be something else in that gray. Su Peijian listened to the original sound. The main character, Andy Dufresne, looked at his old friend of decades, Reed. He said, I hope it's a good thing. Ling Jing looked at Su Peijian's lips and moved. He pulled her waist into his arms. Didn't they say that the strong don't need chicken soup? Su Peijian was silent. At this moment, Ling Jing gently bit her earlobe. So, you admit that you need chicken soup? In other words, he admitted that she was not strong-willed? Su Peijian ignored him. She really didn't need chicken soup. It was just that before, she had been competing with him. But after last night, Su Peijian suddenly reconciled with him. Whether it was a tragedy or a comedy, or a sad life. Even if her heart was empty, no matter what, it was good to be alive. Almost every single one of the women that Sister Sher mentioned had a past that they couldn't control. Sometimes, the tragedy of life was really hard to explain. What had happened? What had happened? What had happened? Instead of running away, it was better to face it. Instead of being conflicted, it was better to let go. Her phone rang. Su Peijian frowned slightly, pushed Ling Jing away, and got up to get her phone. Looking at the number on the screen, she was momentarily distracted. After a few seconds of hesitation, she still picked up. She didn't speak, but Su Qinghui on the other side of the phone wasn't angry at all. Peijian, you finally picked up my call. I called you on New Year's Day. Why didn't you pick up? I was outside. Previously, she had taken Xiang Kaiping abroad. At first, she had forgotten to bring her phone. Later, when she saw it, she didn't know whether to call back or not. I called you on the Lantern Festival, but you didn't pick up. Su Qinghui sounded a little worried. Peixian, are you still blaming Dad? Blame? Su Peixian didn't know what to say. Xiang Kaiping also liked to say that. Did Su Qinghui like to say that now? No. She didn't blame anyone. Then Dad is in Rong City now. I want to see you and have a meal together. Is that okay? Su Peixian didn't agree immediately. Her lips formed a straight line. After thinking for a while she said, Does she know? She didn't call him that. Su Peixian believed that Su Qinghui knew what she meant. Qinshua knows. Don't think too much. Your aunt isn't that kind of person. Su Qinghui originally wanted to say your mother, but it wasn't appropriate anymore. Su Peixian continued to be silent. She wanted to see Su Qinghui. After all, he was her father, and he loved her so much. But, just the two of us? Yes, just the two of us. Do you want to come? Su Peixian's palm tightened on the phone, but she began to walk toward the room. What's the address? I'm not familiar with Rong City. Why don't you tell me the address? Su Qinghui had actually been to Rong City many times, but he respected his daughter's opinion more. Okay, then let's go to Plum Garden. Su Peixian entered the bedroom, opened the wardrobe, and began to pick out clothes. I'll send you the address later. After hanging up the phone, Su Peixian changed her clothes, picked up her bag and put on her phone. When she was about to go out, she saw Ling Jing blocking the door of the room with a bit of dissatisfaction on his face. Are you going out? Yes. You said you wouldn't go out. Su Peixian looked at him as if she was looking at a fool. I have something to do. Get out of the way. I want to go too. Ling Jing was acting shamelessly today. This damn woman, she said she would pay him back, and then she ran away? It really made him want to teach her a lesson. Su Peixian took a step back and looked at him coldly. Are you going to move? No. Ling Jing was tall and blocked the door, not giving Su Peixian any chance to go out. Ling Jing. Su Peixian's face darkened. Don't forget your identity. What right do you have to stop me? It would have been better if she didn't mention her identity. As soon as she mentioned it, Ling Jing immediately exploded. He took 2 steps forward and pressed Su Peixian against the wall. Who am I? Tell me. Just a pretty boy that I keep. Su Peixian didn't mind how hurtful her words were, but it was the truth. Ling Jing, if you still want to continue, get out of the way. Woman. Ling Jing was angry. He lowered his head and was about to bite her lips. How could Su Peixian let him succeed? She tilted her head and pushed him. Ling Jing, don't forget that I can break off this relationship at any time. Woman, don't forget that you still owe me twice. What did he mean by owing or not? Wasn't he the one who said it? Su Peixian didn't want to talk nonsense with him. Seeing that he was about to approach again, she raised her foot and kicked his lower body. Ling Jing didn't expect that this damn woman would dare to hit him at this time. Su Peixian didn't give him a chance to react. She wasn't someone who had the patience to play an unimportant role like Ling Jing. Ling Jing, I'll say it again. Stop it. That word made Ling Jing's movements stop there. What did it mean? What did she think he was? Did she think he was a woman? Crying and making a scene? Dream on. He was a man. Damned woman, just you wait. Do you think I can't do anything to you? I'll wait for the day when you come to beg me. What Ling Jing thought was not within Su Peixian's consideration. She got into the car. When she drove out of the underground parking lot, she glanced at the Cadillac parked by the side. Her tone just now wasn't very good, but she really didn't like Ling Jing's increasingly rogue attitude. If a pet she raised couldn't have some self-awareness, then she would replace him. After all, she didn't care about men. But when the car stopped in Plum Garden, Su Peixian had completely calmed down. Although it was indeed Ling Jing who asked her to accompany him today, she promised him. Since she promised someone else, she naturally had to do it. She broke her promise. No wonder Ling Jing was angry. She could roughly understand Ling Jing's mentality. After all, she was his sugar daddy. It seemed normal for him to want her to accompany him. Forget it. I'll accompany him tomorrow. When Su Peijian entered the door, Su Qinghui happened to be there too. Seeing her, there was a smile on his face. He stepped forward and looked her up and down. Dad. Peijian. Su Qinghui withdrew his gaze and looked at Su Peijian's face. He found that she looked good. You're here. Have you waited for a long time? No, I just arrived. Su Peijian had already made a reservation when she arrived. It wasn't easy to make a reservation here. Fortunately, it wasn't a weekend, so there weren't many people. She booked a small private room and let Su Qinghui in and sat down. After the daily greetings, the two of them entered a state of silence. The waiter came in with tea and poured it for them. He took out a tablet and let them order. Su Qinghui took the tablet from the waiter's hand, looked at the pictures on it, and looked up at Su Peijian. Beijing-style lobster, braised abalone, soft-fried fresh scallops, amber peach kernel, bird's nest soup, osmanthus sugar lotus root, and a flying dragon soup. What do you think, Peijian? Su Peijian didn't say anything. These dishes were all her favorite dishes. She nodded. All are fine. That's it then. Su Qinghui returned the tablet to the waiter. Only the father and daughter were left in the private room, and there was silence for a moment. After the silence, Su Qinghui spoke first. How have you been recently? I'm fine. She looked good. Su Qinghui knew that his daughter had always been proud, but he was afraid that she might not be used to it. He was even more afraid that she would experience the ups and downs of life and not be used to it. Peijian, I actually came a few days ago. I went to see Qingsang. You're not angry, are you? No. What was there to be angry about? She was already angry. Yesterday she almost lost her life because of this. Su Peijian didn't want to continue this topic. These so-called debts and guilt were worthless to her after the fact. She picked up the teapot and poured a cup of tea for Su Qinghui. This Junshan silver needle is good. She was obviously trying to escape, but in Su Qinghui's eyes, she hadn't let go. Although his daughter's personality wasn't like that in the past, who knew if she would change after so many things? Peijian, have you ever thought about going back to Lin City? Back to Lin City? Su Peijian's hand holding the teacup paused. Why? Look, you're in Rong City, so far away from Lin City. If something really happened, I wouldn't be able to take care of you. If you were in Lin City, I would be able to take care of you. No need. Su Peijian lowered her head and didn't look at him. I'm not a child anymore. I don't need anyone to take care of me. This was a little angry. Peijian. Dad, don't say it. I won't go back to Lin City. Besides, if I go back, what will happen to my mother? Xiang Kaiping had nothing now. She was the only one left. With Xiang Caiping's personality, how could she be willing to go back to Lin City? Su Qinghui didn't speak. Some guilt could be made up for in the future. However, some guilt could never be made up for in this lifetime. He could never make up for what he owed Xiang Kaiping. It's okay if you don't go back. If you have anything to say, just tell me. Su Qinghui was afraid that she would mind, so he added, in my heart, you will always be my daughter. This will never change. Okay. Su Peijian lowered her head, and her eyes were a little sore. She suppressed that emotion. The waiter began to serve the dishes. Su Qinghui knew that Su Peijian wouldn't go back with him, so he talked about other things. Previously, I invested in some projects in Rong City. Although the shares and investment weren't the largest, it was still a lot. I don't have time here often. Peijian, I believe in your ability. If you're willing, I want to hand some of these things over to you. What do you think? No need. Su Peijian shook her head. My mother has 2 department stores under her name. I'm managing them now. I have something to do. I know, but that kind of small company is a bit of a waste for you. I know very well what you're capable of. I was serious when I said those words. Peijian, I really hope that you can help me. Chapter 836. The room was very quiet. Su Peijian lowered her head, so that no one could see her expression. Su Qinghui was afraid that Su Peijian wouldn't agree, so he told her about a project he was working on. Or you can join as a participant. If you're willing, I'll send you the information when I get back. What do you think? We'll see. Su Qinghui was a little disappointed that Su Peijian didn't agree right away, but he wasn't in a hurry. The waiter began to serve the dishes, and the father and daughter ate quietly. From time to time, Su Qinghui would put food into Su Peijian's bowl and talk about what had happened in Lin City recently. Of course, those things had nothing to do with the Li family. Su Peijian was only responsible for listening, not speaking. Su Qinghui put down his chopsticks and poured a cup of tea for Su Peijian. "Are you sure you won't consider helping me?" "No." Su Peijian picked up the teacup and felt the warmth in her palm. "Dad, I have something to do now. Although the 2 department stores are small, they are just right for me. As for the rest, let's talk about it later." Su Qinghui was silent for a while, then poured himself another cup of tea. He looked up at Su Peijian and said gently, "Peijian, I know you might not believe me when I say this, but I'm serious. Your talent should not be buried." Su Peijian finished the tea in her cup and put it down. She looked at Su Qinghui. "There was really no need. I am doing very well now. I know that I'm no longer the Su family's eldest daughter. I wasn't thinking about going back either. Whether it's you or my mother, you don't have to feel guilty. What I've lost. If I really want it, I will get it back little by little through my own efforts. I don't need your pity." "How is it pity?" Su Qinghui was shocked by Su Peijian's words. "You are my daughter. I know what's best for you. I'm like all the fathers in the world. I want the best for my daughter. Peijian, don't think that I don't care about you anymore. Impossible. No matter when, you will always be my daughter. Always." Su Peijian's head was still lowered, but the expression on her face had changed a little. She looked up at Su Qinghui. They had been father and daughter for many years. Su Qinghui's words were true. She knew. "Thanks, Dad. You're my daughter. Why are you thanking me?" Su Qinghui was very kind and serious. Su Qinghui erased the mistakes he made on impulse when he was young. In some ways he was a qualified father. Su Peijian knew. "I have a lot of businesses in Rong City, and I meant what I said just now. It's okay if you don't want to take over. If you have other ideas, you can tell me at any time. Daddy will always support you." "All right." Su Peijian's eyes were a little sore. She lowered her head and suppressed those emotions. After leaving the plum garden and saying goodbye to Su Qinghui, Su Peijian didn't go home immediately. Instead, she went to the company to take a look. The Lantern Festival had just passed, and people were still immersed in the festive atmosphere of the new year. The company's activities were very grand. Whether it was online or offline, business was good. After reading the report, Su Peijian sat in her office, feeling a little bored. It was not difficult for her to manage all of this. Thinking of Su Qinghui's words, she knew that he was telling the truth. Compared to Xiang Kaiping, Su Qinghui was undoubtedly more aware of her ambition. However, that kind of ambition was only in the past. Now she had lost that ambition. Realizing that she was feeling sad in the office, Su Peijian shook her head. Chicken soup really didn't suit her. When she returned to Rome Garden, Su Peijian found that Ling Jing was not there. She frowned slightly and looked at Xiao Zhao, who was preparing dinner in the kitchen. "Where is he?" She didn't say who, but she believed that Xiao Zhao would understand. "You mean Mr. Ling? He left." When they were arguing, Xiao Zhao was cleaning up in the kitchen and didn't hear it. "Mr. Ling left not long after you left." After saying this, Xiao Zhao carefully looked at Su Peijian's face. He seemed very angry when he left. Angry? What was there to be angry about? Su Peijian didn't take Ling Jing's anger to heart. It was nothing more than anger that she didn't accompany him. At most, she would accompany him for another day tomorrow. However, Su Peijian didn't expect that Ling Jing didn't come back that day. Not only did he not come back, but he also didn't come back the next day. Su Peijian, who hadn't seen Ling Jing in Rong City for 2 days in a row, seriously thought about the conflict between them that day. It was true that she broke her promise, but wasn't Ling Jing taking her too seriously? Since he had such a bad temper, she would leave him alone for a few days. Su Peijian didn't take it to heart at all. She didn't even call or send Ling Jing a message. In the blink of an eye, she returned to the villa where Xiang Kaiping lived. She didn't come back for 2 days, and Xiang Kaiping was very happy to see her back. Xiang Kaiping didn't dare to control her daughter at all. It wasn't that she didn't want her daughter to come back to accompany her, but she didn't want her daughter to be unhappy. She was very happy that Su Peijian came back, but she would wait if Su Peijian didn't come back. As a mother, she couldn't do anything about it. Su Peijian was a smart person and had seen all kinds of people. She could completely see Xiang Kaiping's subtle feelings, which were between compensation and guilt. She could see it, but she couldn't understand it. She really didn't understand why people were always obsessed with the past. According to the current average life expectancy, Xiang Kaiping could live for at least 20 or 30 years. If she continued to be so stubborn, Su Peijian couldn't do anything about it. While living in the villa, Su Peijian still woke up early every day, but the result of waking up early here was that she could go outside to exercise. Rome City was actually still very cold in the first month. Early in the morning, Su Peijian changed into a set of thick white sportswear and went out for a run. It was still very cold outside. She didn't run slowly, but she didn't run fast either. There was really nothing to see in the early spring neighborhood. Even though their neighborhood was considered a villa area, they had put in a lot of effort to plant some greenery. However, compared to the beauty of Lin City, it still seemed simple and boring. After running one lap, the sun slowly rose. She was about to go home when she saw the golden retriever again. The golden retriever saw her inexplicably excited and rushed toward her. Su Peijian stopped and stood there motionlessly. The golden retriever, however, pounced on her without any hesitation. Just as it was about to pounce on Su Peijian, the dog leash around its neck was held by someone. It didn't succeed in pouncing on Su Peijian, so it barked there with some dissatisfaction. Dian Dian. A gentle male voice sounded. Lin Feixing walked around from behind the trees. When he saw Su Peijian, he nodded at her and said, "Miss Su." He was also wearing sportswear, and it was very coincidental. He was wearing white. However, Su Peijian ignored him. "Yes." Su Peijian responded as a greeting. She passed by Lin Feixing and wanted to leave, but he grabbed her hand at that moment. "Miss Su, what's the matter?" Su Peijian subconsciously frowned when she saw his hand grabbing her. Lin Feixing seemed to have reacted and quickly let go of her hand. "Sorry." He was a little uncomfortable, but seeing Su Peijian's cold expression, he couldn't help but say, "Miss Su, I've thought about what you said the other day." "The other day? Which day?" Su Peijian took some time to remember which day he was referring to. She didn't speak and just stared at Lin Feixing. His face, which was full of elitism, actually looked a little perturbed at that moment. "Miss Su, I think that everyone has a past. It's not a big deal. Your past is the past, and your present is the present. I don't want your past, I only want your present and future." Su Peijian was stunned for a moment. The golden retriever by her feet was still rubbing against her pants, and she was dazed for a moment. "Mr. Lin, you can call me Feixing." Lin Feixing seemed to have finally mustered up the courage to finish what he wanted to say. In the end, he felt a little embarrassed. "I admit that I was a little conflicted at first, but I don't have the right to criticize you. I've had girlfriends abroad. We broke up because we didn't get along, although I met someone suitable later and spent time with two of them. Later, because I had to return to China, I didn't do anything about it. I think that the reason why we broke up so easily is that those feelings weren't deep. When you told me that day, I was really surprised. But these few days, I've been thinking about you. Peijian, can I call you Peijian?" Lin Feixing's eyes were filled with hidden passion. Su Peijian didn't know what to say. The golden retriever seemed to have infected its owner's emotions. It barked a few times and barked even more happily. "Peijian, I'm not a child. I believe that you're not either. Mature men and women naturally have their own ways to solve problems and deal with them. So I want to ask, can you give me a chance?" Su Peijian didn't rush to answer. The Lin Feixing in front of her was undoubtedly a very good marriage partner. He had good qualities and a good appearance. Most importantly, he didn't mind her past. She thought that she had a good eye for people. When Lin Feixing spoke to her, his eyes were open. She could tell that what he said was true. He really didn't mind. Looking down at the golden retriever that was playing around her feet, she frowned slightly. Even though I've been in prison? Yes. Lin Feixing nodded. Prison is your punishment. No matter what you've done. Since you've been punished, it's in the past. Su Peijian didn't speak. That was the truth. Life in prison was God's punishment for her. She had already accepted the result, so she didn't feel that she had anything to regret. However, she was really surprised that Lin Feixing could say something like that. For a moment, she didn't know what answer to give him. You don't have to rush to give an answer. Lin Feixing saw that she didn't speak for a long time, and was afraid that she would be too conflicted. He quickly gave her a way out. I can wait for you. Really? Su Peijian blinked and looked up. She met the passion in Lin Feixing's eyes, and was a little confused. You like me? The man standing in front of her actually blushed. Su Peijian didn't want his answer. She looked at him, and took a step forward. What do you like about me? Just this appearance. Just her face. She had once read a saying that all love at first sight was just a result of the appearance. Although she wasn't in a state of panic, she really didn't have more energy to manage a relationship. You might think that I'm exaggerating when I say love at first sight. But some things are just like that. Love doesn't start. If everything about love could be explained, how could there be so many infatuated men and women in this world? What he said made sense. Su Peijian nodded. Mr. Lin, I can't give you an answer now. Can you think about it later? Is that okay? Of course. Lin Feixing smiled. Seeing that Su Peijian was about to leave, he stopped her again, and took out his phone at the same time. Peijian, although you need time to think about it, can you add me as a friend first? Su Peijian saw the uneasiness in his eyes. In the end, she didn't reject him. It was just one more friend. She didn't have any burdens. Back at the villa, during dinner, Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Peijian with a hesitant expression. Mom, what's the matter? No. Xiang Kaiping quickly shook her head. Just now, I think I saw Lin Feixing looking for you upstairs. He also came to our house last time. He came twice. Peijian you. He came twice. Su Peijian didn't hear Xiang Kaiping mention it. Hearing it now, she wasn't surprised. Yes, he was looking for me just now. He said that he doesn't mind what happened to me. Really? He came to my house once before and said that. That's what he meant. There was a hint of anticipation in Xiang Kaiping's voice. Peijian, you said it yourself before. You said that if Lin Feixing doesn't mind your past, you'll give him a chance? It wasn't that she was impatient, but Xiang Kaiping really didn't want to lose such a good son-in-law. I remember. I've already given him my contact information. As for the future, we'll talk about it later. Okay, that's good. That's good. It was best to have contact information. Xiang Kaiping's face was full of anticipation. She was afraid that Su Peijian would miss out on a good marriage. Su Peijian couldn't understand this kind of thinking. She didn't want to continue this topic. After dinner, she went to work. Although Su Peijian didn't want to take on Su Qinghui's business in Rong City, when he sent her the information, she still read it carefully. She had to admit that at Su Qinghui's age, he had experience, and foresight. This project was indeed good. Su Peijian was indeed interested. However, if she only took care of Su Qinghui's business, it would be lacking something. She happened to have a sum of money on hand. If she participated as a shareholder, it would be a good choice. Su Peijian calculated the money she had left after deducting the house she bought last time. She called Su Qinghui. She asked in detail about the operation. In the end, she mentioned the funds and the people. She was part of the bargaining chip. Su Qinghui understood that. Su Qinghui couldn't be happier that his daughter was willing to take on the company. He immediately set up some details with Su Peijian. He also talked to a third-party partner and introduced Su Peijian's identity. In this way, Su Peijian was busy again. After she was busy for a week, it was already 10 days later when she finished all the information and the previous procedures. The first month of the lunar calendar was almost over, and she hadn't seen Ling Jing for almost half a month. When Su Peijian got off work one day, she suddenly remembered that her emotions had been quite tense recently. She needed to relax. As for how to relax, was there anything more relaxing than the balance of yin and yang? She called Ling Jing, but Ling Jing didn't answer. Su Peijian frowned. She really didn't know that the pretty boy she raised could be so angry. She originally didn't want to pay attention to it, but she more or less broke her promise that day. It was rare. Su Peijian patiently called Ling Jing for a second time. Chapter 837. The crystal lights hanging above the high living room were shining brightly, and there were 2 rows of bodyguards on both sides of the hall. The group of people didn't dare to breathe too loudly. Gu Xiu stood next to Ling Jing, his head half hanging, and he seemed very embarrassed. Ling Jing sat on the sofa quite leisurely, his right index finger tapping his knee unconsciously. Under the sofa, there were 2 men who were detained there, kneeling on the ground. One of them was bleeding from his shoulder, and the other was bleeding from his leg. The blood dyed the carpet in the living room red. The 2 men didn't dare to make any big movements, and their bodies kept shaking. Looking at the blood, Ling Jing stopped tapping his knee. "You've got guts. Coming here to kill me?" Ling Jing finally spoke. As soon as he spoke, the 2 men kneeling on the ground trembled even more. "Using such a stupid way to do it. You'd better not tell me who your master is. Really, it's too embarrassing." The 2 men seemed to be angry, but more than that they were afraid. Vaguely, they were nervous with a sigh of relief. "Gu Xiu." Ling Jing didn't look at the 2 men. His hand began to tap his knee again. "Young master." Gu Xiu took a step forward and bowed. The 2 crocodiles in the backyard pond probably haven't smelled human for a long time. "Throw them in." "Young master." Gu Xiu was stunned for a moment. When did they raise crocodiles in their backyard? "Young Master Ling, please spare us." The 2 men suddenly became terrified, and one of them kept kowtowing. Young Master Ling, please spare us. 4th young master asked us to come. Young Master Ling, it really has nothing to do with us. Young Master Ling." Ling Jing didn't have the patience to listen anymore. He waved his hand and asked someone to drag the 2 men away. The sound of begging was endless. The blood that the 2 men had shed stained the living room all the way. Ling Jing frowned and motioned for someone to come and clean it up. Soon, someone came to clean it up. Ling Jing sat still for a long time before looking at the slender figure who had been staying in the corner of the living room. If one didn't pay attention, one would almost ignore it. The person's body had begun to tremble, especially when Ling Jing glanced at her. Her whole body was shaking like a fallen leaf in the wind. Ling Jing hooked her finger, and someone immediately carried the man over. The young woman's body collapsed in front of Ling Jing. Ling Jing lowered his head to look at her. "Tisk, scared to this extent? What a coward." Su Peijian's face flashed across his mind. If that woman was here, how would she react? Shen Lefyu knelt there. She had seen everything that had happened just now, and she was terrified. Seeing Ling Jing's hand reaching over, she tried her best not to scream, but her body kept trying to step back. Unfortunately, there was nowhere for him to go. Ling Jing pinched her chin and looked at the pitiful face with tears in her eyes. Afraid, Shen Lefyu couldn't even make a sound. She just trembled and looked at Ling Jing as if she was looking at a demon. "Your brother is just like them now." My brother?" Shen Lefyu's face turned pale. Where is my brother? Can you let him go? I beg you, let him go. If you want to see your brother, it's very simple. It's very simple if you want to save your brother. This matter depends on what you do. Shen Lefyu blinked when she met Ling Jing's gloomy eyes. When Ling Jing retracted his hand, she seemed to have suddenly understood. She suddenly became bold and reached out to hug Ling Jing's neck. She raised her head and was about to move closer to his lips. Ling Jing looked at Shen Lefyu's face that was getting closer and closer. She was crying like a pear blossom in the rain, looking very pitiful. Unexpectedly, he didn't push her away. Seeing her lips getting closer and closer, his phone rang at this moment. It was an unfamiliar ringtone. He hadn't used that phone for a long time. He glanced at the coffee table. At this time, the only person who would call him was that woman. Damn that woman, she hadn't called him for so many days. Now she knew to contact him? He ignored her. He looked at Shen Lefyu, who was stunned and didn't know what to do. The evil in his heart expanded infinitely at this moment. He pulled Shen Lefyu's body up and held her on his lap. He lowered his head and was about to kiss her. When he saw her lips, which weren't considered full and were a little pale, his mind couldn't help but think of Su Peijian's lips. Delicate, bright red, plump, seductive. He tilted his head and kissed Shen Lefeu's cheek. Her skin was not bad. Naturally, the skin of a young girl wasn't bad either. However, compared to Su Peijian, it was a little less delicate. Her skin, nourished by expensive skincare products, was as smooth as jade. The phone had stopped ringing at this time. He stepped back a little and looked at the phone with his eyes half closed. Damn that woman. Was there so little patience? She wouldn't call again after one call? The anger just now was spreading even more. The evil seemed to be unable to be suppressed anymore. He got up and grabbed Shen Lefeu to go upstairs to the room. Shen Lefeu's body trembled. She had clearly made up her mind, but she was still afraid. Ling Jing had only taken 3 steps when his phone rang again. He stopped in his tracks. He turned around and stared at the screen of the phone for a long time. His slightly narrowed eyes were a little fierce. He was still holding Shen Lefeu with one hand. She was dragged a few steps, but because he suddenly stopped, she bumped into his back. Ling Jing didn't have much patience. He turned around and glared at Shen Lefeu. His eyes were sharp as if he wanted to kill her. Get lost. Shen Lefeu's body trembled even more violently. It was as if she completely didn't understand why the man, who looked kind just now, was so gloomy. Ling Jing didn't care about her. His eyes fell on the phone. After watching the phone ring 1, 2, 3 times, he finally reached out and picked up the phone. On the other end of the phone, Su Peijian was about to hang up. She suddenly picked up the phone and was stunned. There was no sound on the other end of the phone. She glanced at the phone that showed that it was in a call. Ling Jing. She was clearly just calling his name. Ling Jing actually felt that the evil fire from just now had flared up again. If you have something to say, say it. His tone was a little angry. He was so angry that even he was surprised. Didn't you ignore me for half a month? Why are you still calling me? When Ling Jing said this tone, it felt like a wind in the living room. Gu Xiao and the bodyguards standing at the side wanted to bury their heads in the ground. He glanced at them coldly, and they quickly left. Before leaving, the 2 bodyguards didn't forget to go forward and take Shen Lefeu, who was half lying on the ground, away. Su Peijian only heard some rustling sounds on the other end of the phone. She didn't think much about it. Her attention was on what Ling Jing said. Thinking of how she broke her promise that day, she felt a little guilty. I'm sorry, I had something urgent that day, so I left first. I'll make it up to you next time. With Su Peijian's personality, this was a rare apology. After all, she was still educated since she was young. If she was in the wrong, she was in the wrong. If she broke her promise, she broke her promise. How do you want to make it up to me? Ling Jing could only be thankful that there was no one in the living room. Otherwise, if people saw him like a different person, their eyeballs would probably fall out of their sockets. How do you want to make it up to me? For Su Peijian, it was nothing more than money. From her understanding, Ling Jing was a little gangster. What else could he have other than money? I want you to accompany me for 3 days. Ling Jing thought for a moment and added, I want to go to the hot spring. You come with me. The Ling family had a very famous hot spring club. He happened to be going there to inspect the property in the next few days. Just in time. No. Su Peijian was very busy now. How could she have the time? Then what else are you talking about? Ling Jing's temper rose. You untrustworthy woman. After Ling Jing finished speaking, he hung up the phone. After hanging up, he still felt that it wasn't enough. He picked up the phone and was about to smash it. Damn woman, he would see how he would deal with her later. The phone rang again. It was still Su Peijian. Ling Jing pressed it. He was the dignified young Master Ling. A woman like Su Peijian couldn't play with him whenever she wanted. This time, the phone rang a few times before hanging up again. Ling Jing felt that he couldn't suppress his evil fire anymore. He planned to go to Shen Lefeu. Whether she was as beautiful as Su Peijian or not, she was at least a woman. The phone rang again. This time it was a text message. There was only one sentence on it. If 3 days won't do, 2 days will do. After sending that message, Su Peijian didn't call again. It was okay for a pet to throw a tantrum occasionally. But if it was really too much, she wouldn't lower herself. She calmly went to take a shower and tidied herself up. After looking at the report and the previous plan again, she finally went back to her room to sleep. Before going to sleep, she glanced at her phone. There were no text messages or calls. Su-Peision put down her phone and went to sleep alone. While she was half asleep, she felt as if something was pressing on her. She opened her eyes and found that Ling Jing had come back. Not only did he come back, but he had also taken a shower. His body was still damp, and there was naturally a bit of coldness in the dampness. She pushed him with some dissatisfaction. "Get up, it's cold." "Don't worry, it won't be cold soon." Ling Jing lowered his head and kissed her lips. His actions were rude and forceful. He was used to this, so Su-Peision didn't find it strange. It was just that today, he seemed to be a little more eager than before. What she didn't know was that after she sent those command-like words, Ling Jing almost dropped his phone. His intention was to strangle this damn woman to death. At least he had to teach her a lesson. But who was he? He was Ling Jing, the young master of the Ling family. It was easy to ignore this woman, and it was easy to take revenge on her. But it was not easy to conquer her. If he could make her fall in love with him, and then abandon her. Ling Jing felt his blood boil as soon as he thought about it. He really couldn't wait to see the look on this woman's face when she went crazy for him. The body was the first step, and the heart was the second. For the final goal, so what if he took a step back? After all, the real winner would be the one who had the last laugh. So he came again. Although he came, the fire in his heart didn't dissipate easily. He hugged Su-Peision hard, rough and barbaric with absolute masculinity. It was a little painful, a little numb, and some other things. Su-Peision half closed her eyes and stepped back uncomfortably. Ling Jing was really a beast in bed. Her slender waist was held tightly in his palm, and her body was twisted into all kinds of angles. She realized one thing in that twisted state. Ling Jing couldn't be in a bad mood, could he? When Su-Peision sat in the Cadillac, she only looked at the road outside and then closed her eyes again. She got up very early. However, as soon as she had breakfast, she was caught by Ling Jing and taken out of the house. She didn't know why Ling Jing was crazy last night, but he kept torturing her. Even now, her waist was still hurting. She wasn't interested in asking where Ling Jing was taking her, so she closed her eyes to rest. When the car stopped in front of an antique building, Su-Peision just woke up. She turned around and looked at Ling Jing. He was looking at her. "You're awake? Just in time. Let's get out." Her feet were a little weak, but after sleeping in the car for a while, she felt much better. She looked at the time. They had been driving for about an hour and a half. She stopped and looked ahead. The building in front of her was antique and very charming. Su-Peision was a little surprised to see such green tiles and white walls in a place like Rome City. "Let's go." Su-Peision wasn't in a hurry to enter the door. She looked at Ling Jing and said, "Such a place should be a membership system, right?" Ling Jing was stunned for a moment. At that time, he only thought that coming here to play could make Su-Peision fall in love with him after relaxing. He had completely forgotten about this. "It's a membership system. However, I have a membership card." His expression seemed a little uncomfortable. "Let's go." Su-Peision stood still. "Your membership card wasn't given to you by your last sugar daddy, was it?" There was a flash of anger in Ling Jing's eyes, but only for a moment. He gently shook his hair, took a step forward, and looked at Su-Peision. "What? If I say yes, will you not go in?" Su-Peision didn't answer and glanced at him. As soon as they entered the door, a waiter came over. When he saw Ling Jing, there was a flash of surprise in his eyes. Su-Peision wasn't surprised. Since Ling Jing came with the card of a former sugar daddy, it wasn't surprising that the other party knew him. "Hello, madam. Do you have a membership card? Do you have an appointment?" When the waiter met Ling Jing's eyes, he automatically swallowed the latter greeting and stepped forward respectfully to look at Su-Peision. It was Su-Peision's style to be straightforward. She took out a card from her bag and handed it to the waiter. "I don't have a membership card. Can I get one now? Is that okay?" "Of course. But madam, what level do you want to get? Our different levels have different fees, and the services you can enjoy are also different. The highest level, Okay, madam. The annual fee here is 1 million yuan a year. The intermediate fee is 2 million. The supreme membership fee is 3 million a year. Are you sure you want to get a supreme membership? Yes. Su Peijian didn't dwell on these small things. After getting the membership, she turned to look at Ling Jing and put the card in her hand. If you want to come next time, use mine. What is this? Ling Jing held the card and stared at Su Peijian's phoenix eyes. You can calculate whatever you want. I just don't like it when you use other women's things to please me. That made her feel disgusted. Chapter 838. Su Peijian's reaction was to raise her eyebrows and not look at him at all. Jealous? Would she be jealous of him? Was it necessary for her to be jealous of a man she could buy with money? Let's go. The membership fee was high for a reason. The environment here was really good. Most importantly, the supporting facilities were quite complete. In addition to the special spa hot spring, there were also health centers and entertainment centers. Su Peijian came here after breakfast in the morning. She was taken to a special room, which was divided into its own little world. She was very tired yesterday. It was good to come here at this time to relax. She felt a touch of warmth in her palm. She looked down and found that Ling Jing, who was following her, was holding her hand. She wanted to break free, but he held it very tightly. I've been here before. How about I introduce you to it? Su Peijian stared at him and wanted to withdraw her hand from his palm, but he held it so tightly that she couldn't break free. She glared at him and simply let him be. No one here knew her, and she didn't care much about her current reputation. The garden was very large, and the scenery was worthy of the membership fee. There were pavilions, rockery ponds, and winding corridors. The two of them held hands and finally went to the guest room. It turned out to be a small separate courtyard. The courtyard was paved with bluestone, and the guest room was inside. The antique room was the living room outside, and the room was directly inside. There was a traditional Chinese carved mahogany bed against the wall, and a round wooden window in front of it. The scenery was really good. Living in such a room made people feel as if they had gone back to the past. Su Peijian walked to the window and looked at the small pond and rockery outside. The environment here is good, right? Su Peijian turned around, and her eyes fell on Ling Jing's face. You haven't slept in this bed with your former sugar daddy, have you? Of course not. Ling Jing put his arm around her waist. Although it's not my first time coming to this club, it is indeed my first time here. And I've only been here with you. Su Peijian's face was indifferent, and it was obvious that she didn't believe it. I'm telling the truth. When I came here before, the hot spring had just opened, and this place hadn't been built yet. Su Peijian didn't speak, and Ling Jing bit her cheek angrily. You don't believe me? To believe or not to believe? What was the difference? He had other women and she had other men. There was nothing to say. This bed is very sturdy. Do you want to try it? Ling Jing hugged her waist, hinting at her. Su Peijian looked at him coldly. I'm hungry. I'm hungry too. Ling Jing's hands started to get naughty, and Su Peijian slapped them away. I'm serious. He was also serious. However, Ling Jing thought of what she did last night and raised her eyebrows. Okay, then let's go eat first. The cafeteria of the club was next to the guest room. There was a huge Chinese restaurant on the first floor, and the private rooms were on the second floor. There was an open-air pavilion at the back, with a layer of muslin circling the edge. It looked very artistic. You could walk through the corridor and go to the water pavilion to eat. However, it was too cold now, and Ling Jing's suggestion was rejected by Su Peijian. The wind was too strong, and the temperature outside was too low. She was not interested. Today, Ling Jing was rarely talkative and went to the second floor with her. The dining table was near the window. From here, one could see most of the scenery in the garden. Looking carefully, it was really not worse than the Jiangnan garden that she had been to before. A cup of tea appeared in front of her, and Su Peijian glanced at Ling Jing. Today Ling Jing was undoubtedly very attentive. This kind of attentiveness made her a little unaccustomed. Once upon a time, she had no lack of such attentive people around her. At that time, Su Peijian had many such attentive people around her. Those people all had their own motives. In this regard, Ling Jing was more direct than those people. It was a straightforward ambition to curry favor with a financial backer. The dishes here are very good. There are chefs from the 8 major cuisines who can cook. Among them, there are 2 chefs whose ancestors were royal chefs. As they spoke, the waiter had already begun to serve the dishes. The dishes were served with high-quality bone china. The quality was extremely beautiful, and each portion was not much. But they all looked and smelled good. I specially ordered this stewed black chicken with monkey head mushroom for you. This soup is very good for women. Ling Jing waved the waiter away, and he personally filled a bowl of soup for Su Peijian and put it in front of her. This cherry pork is said to be Cixie's favorite dish. Try it. Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing attentively serving her food, and she was in a trance for a moment. It was indeed a long time. She hadn't seen this kind of simple flattery for a long time. Xiang Kaiping was very good to her, but that kind of kindness was mother-daughter love, and there was also some guilt and compensation. She actually didn't like the flattering look in Xiang Kaiping's eyes every time. She was an elder, and her flattery always made her feel pressure. Ling Jing's flattery was different. It was very simple, and this kind of flattery would make her feel no burden. Thank you. It was rare for Su Peijian to thank Ling Jing. Ling Jing smiled. There was a flash of pride in his eyes. When he, young Master Ling, wanted to flatter someone, wasn't it a matter of minutes? The dishes were indeed good. Su Peijian was in such a beautiful scene, tasting the delicious food, and her mood was indeed much better. After dinner, the 2 of them went back to the room to take a nap. Su Peijian thought that Ling Jing would mess around. Unexpectedly, he didn't. He actually simply hugged her to sleep. Su Peijian felt a little strange, but she really let herself fall asleep. When she woke up, it was already evening. The room was already dark, and Ling Jing was no longer by her side. She got up and found that she had slept so deeply during the day for the first time. Just as she left the room, Ling Jing came in. Seeing that she was awake, there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. You're awake? Just in time. Let's go to the hot spring. We'll eat later. How about it? Su Peijian didn't refuse. Last night, Ling Jing tossed her around too much, and her body was indeed a little uncomfortable. The hot spring was at the other end of the guest room, and the 2 of them walked along the way as if it were a walk. Ling Jing was still holding her hand, and Su Peijian didn't try to pull her hand out this time. The environment was good, and the mood was good. The hot spring was also Chinese. The large private room was steaming because of the hot spring. Changing into a swimsuit and soaking in the pool made people feel comfortable all over. Su Peijian felt comfortable and closed her eyes. Suddenly, a hand appeared on her waist. Ling Jing placed his chin on her neck. How about this hot spring? As he spoke, he wrapped his hand around her waist. Do you want me to make you more comfortable? Su Peijian frowned, but Ling Jing began to massage her shoulders. She turned around and glanced at him. Ling Jing's long and narrow eyes were filled with smiles. The room was filled with Chinese palace lanterns. The light was dim and yellow, and people looked a little hazy in the water vapor. The man's appearance was seductive. At this moment, when he smiled, Su Peijian actually felt a little thirsty. Ling Jing's hand exerted force on her shoulder. It was neither light nor heavy, and the strength was just right. Su Peijian withdrew her gaze and felt her body slowly relax under his massage. Something began to spread with the movement of Ling Jing's hand. It was so subtle that it was hard to notice. Is it comfortable? The man's lips brushed past her neck, and she subconsciously shrank her neck. The hand on her back moved to her waist, and the man's palm was extremely hot. She suddenly felt as if there was a fire burning where he had touched. She didn't know if it was the temperature of the hot spring or the temperature of his palm. How is this strength? Ling Jing's lips pressed against her again, and it seemed to touch her earlobe. Su Peijian didn't respond for the first time, and her body moved forward. However, the direction of the hand on her waist changed from rubbing to hugging. He held her in his arms, and his embrace was very firm. Not comfortable. Ling Jing, let go of me. No. The man lowered his voice, and it sounded a little strange and sexy. Such a beautiful scene shouldn't exist in vain. isn't it? The warm lips fell on her neck. Unlike the storm last night, it was extremely light and gentle. The touch was like an electric current, and as the man's lips fell, it spread to every part of her body. Not only were the lips very hot, but the man's hand was also very hot. With electricity, it went from the surface of the water to the bottom of the water. Her body was turned around, and the man sat on the steps in the pool. He scooped up half of her body and put it down. The spring was undoubtedly convenient for the man. This was the first time Su Peijian had such a scene, such a position, accompanied by a sense of confusion that she had never felt before. Su Peijian gradually lost her mind. Her gaze fell on the man's seductive face, under the dim yellow light. She narrowed her eyes slightly, reached out to hold his face, and for the first time, took the initiative to kiss his lips. That was the best stimulation. At this point, the man's attack began to change rhythm. The sound of the water turned from soft to loud, and the temperature from low to high, almost boiling. There were many places for entertainment in the clubhouse. Soak in the hot spring, go to the spa for physical therapy. There was also a sports hall in another area of the clubhouse. There was an indoor golf course, tennis court, and gym. Everything else was fine. But Su Peijian had always been good at tennis. Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue were both very good at tennis. Surprisingly, Ling Jing was also very good at tennis. With a skillful swing of her hand, the ball flew in Ling Jing's direction. Ling Jing caught her ball perfectly and returned it. Su Peijian thought that she was good at sports. She usually had good stamina, but after being tortured by this guy in the hot spring yesterday, her waist was a little sore. Slowly she felt a little weak. She didn't catch Ling Jing's counterattack. She waved her hand and walked to the rest area to rest. She glanced at the filico on the rest table. Su Peijian blinked her eyes. It was indeed worth the millions of annual membership fee. Your skills are good, but your stamina is too poor. Ling Jing followed her over with a smile in his eyes. He had been smiling more in the past 2 days. Su Peijian glanced at him and looked away. When the man smiled, the corners of his eyes were raised, and there seemed to be stars in his eyes. It added a bit of a devilish temperament. Men can sometimes mislead people. You have to exercise more next time. Ling Jing's words made Su Peijian finally look at him. If you hadn't gone too far last night, I wouldn't have lost to you today. You are really confident in yourself. Ling Jing held his chin with one hand and raised his eyebrows to look at the pride on Su Peijian's face. I don't think I went too far last night. After all, you were so enthusiastic. I can only return the favor and be more enthusiastic. Even though Su Peijian didn't care about her reputation and other people's words now, this kind of thing still made her uncomfortable when Ling Jing said it out loud. Did I say something wrong? Ignoring the hint in his eyes, Su Peijian looked at the time. When are we going home? She had been playing for 2 days, and she had to go back to the company tomorrow. The company's affairs, including the project Su Qinghui was working on at hand. Su Qinghui had already returned to Lin City. As one of the people in charge, she naturally had to keep an eye on him. Let's stay for another day and go back tomorrow, Ling Jing said rather shamelessly. Anyway, we're already here. Isn't it good to completely relax? Ling Jing. Su Peijian stared at his face and didn't want to joke with him. I said I would accompany you for 2 days, and now it's already been 2 days. Tisk. Ling Jing looked at her cold face and thought of how passionate this woman was in bed, and how cold she was when she got out of bed. He had the urge to let her show such a passionate and uncontrollable side during the day. He got up and walked to the chair Su Peijian was sitting on. The lounge chairs in the club were very wide. He successfully squeezed half of his body into it, and then he took the opportunity to circle her into his arms. Why do I feel like I'm accompanying you? His lips gently rubbed her neck, and his voice was very soft. Look, you're here to soak in the hot spring and have a spa. You usually go to work every day and you're so tense. It's rare to have such relaxation. Tell me, are you accompanying me? Or am I accompanying you? When he kissed her, Su Peijian subconsciously shrank her body. Ling Jing, let go of me. Do you admit that I'm actually accompanying you? Ling Jing insisted on an answer. In the past 2 days, Su Peijian had indeed been very relaxed. so relaxed that she allowed Ling Jing to be so intimate with her in such a public setting. He looked around. Fortunately, this place was very private, and no one else was walking here. When his lips fell on her earlobe, Su Peijian finally couldn't bear it anymore. She turned around and avoided his kiss. "Isn't it right for you to accompany me?" Ling Jing choked and looked at the calmness on the woman's face. He somewhat wanted to strangle her. However, he endured it. He understood that a little impatience would spoil great plans. He curled his lips, raised his hand, and gently stroked her lips, watching her full lips become more and more delicate because of his movements. "Yes, it's right for me to accompany you. But I think I've done much more than accompanying you in the past 2 days. Don't you think you should give me some reward?" "Reward?" Su Peijian frowned slightly. Without waiting for her to speak, Ling Jing pointed his finger on her lips. "Don't mention money, or I'll be unhappy." "Then what do you want?" She had indeed been very relaxed these past 2 days. In fact, from the time she was imprisoned to the time she had been released from prison, this was a rare time for her to relax. In this regard, Ling Jing was right. Chapter 839. Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing's face and believed that he wanted more, so she didn't object. "All right." Ling Jing smiled again. This man's appearance was indeed very deceptive. When he smiled, it always made people feel as if the clouds and fog had dispersed. Su Peijian closed her eyes and suppressed the strange feeling in her heart. As the eldest daughter of the Su family, she had seen countless men. How could she be bewitched by a man's appearance? Not to mention the appearance of a hooligan. So what if he had a good appearance? It was just a face. Ling Jing didn't argue with Su Peijian to the end. At night, the car drove into the parking lot of Rong Park. After playing for 2 days, Su Peijian was a little tired. It was mainly because Ling Jing was too good at making trouble. He seemed to have endless energy. Day and night, whether it was in bed or out of bed, she was full of energy. In this aspect, he was qualified to be a gigolo. Su Peijian looked at the person in front of her, and there was a flash of surprise in her eyes. "Why are you here?" She had been following up on the case left by Su Qinghui. The person sent by the other party was the vice president of the company. Before that, it was the president of the other party who personally contacted Su Qinghui. The CEO of the company said that he had something to do these few days, so Su Peijian didn't think in that direction. Today, when he saw the visitor, he was surprised to find out that the president he was talking about was Lin Feixing. "Yes, I only found out after I joined the company." Lin Feixing wore a faint smile on his face. When he entered the company, he saw the report brought by the vice president, as well as a new round of proposals. When he saw Su Peijian's name, he was pleasantly surprised. "I didn't expect President Su, who we've been talking about cooperation with, to be your father. What a coincidence." "I didn't expect that either." In fact, Su Qinghui seemed to have mentioned it once before. However, at that time, she was a little absent-minded and focused on the cooperation with the other party. Naturally, she did not notice the name that was mentioned only once. Lin Feixing smiled. His eyes were filled with surprise. "It's not just a coincidence, it's also fate. Since we are so fated, why don't we have lunch together?" "Sure." Su Peijian didn't reject it. In fact, Lin Feixing had been sending her messages from time to time in the past few days. Out of politeness, she would reply. There was no further contact, nor was there any ambiguity between them. It was just like making a new friend. She was surprised to see Lin Feixing here. The vice president and secretary of the other party immediately entered the conference room. The two of them had a tacit understanding. They didn't talk about what had happened before. Instead, they talked about work. In the past, Su Peijian's impression of Lin Feixing was that he looked like a successful elite. And the process of the two of them talking about business also confirmed this point. As the CEO of a large company, he was naturally capable. Su Peijian liked smart people. She could tell that Lin Feixing was the same. The two of them shared the same view in many aspects. The negotiation went smoothly. After that, Lin Feixing asked the vice president and his secretary to leave. He stood up and walked over to Su Peijian. Peijian, you really surprised me. Thank you. After Su Peijian finished speaking, she did not forget to add, however, I will not agree to your conditions just because you praised me. Lin Feixing laughed. Peijian, you are really interesting. Come on, let's go eat. Su Peijian did not object. The two of them left the conference room and entered the elevator together. Peijian, what do you want to eat? Western food or Chinese food? I'm fine with either. It doesn't matter. Then let's have Chinese food. Lin Feixing smiled. Anyone who has stayed abroad will know that no matter how many countries you visit, Chinese food will always be the best. Of course, no matter where the food was, it always lacked flavor when compared to Chinese food. However, as a returnee, Lin Feixing did not become a banana man. Su Peijian felt that it was good. Because the two of them had to work in the afternoon, they chose a nearby Cantonese restaurant with a good environment. How about Cantonese food? It's okay. I'm fine with anything. Lin Feixing and Su Peijian entered the restaurant and found a seat near the corner. Lin Feixing was very gentlemanly. He not only pulled out a chair for Su Peijian to sit down, he asked for her opinion first when the menu was served. Su Peijian did not give any opinion. Lin Feixing followed Su Peijian's habit and ordered a few specialties. While waiting for the dishes to be served, he looked at Su Peijian. If it was just superficial before, it was now that he was moved. Peijian, what do you think about what I said to you last time? After talking about business, it was naturally time to talk about personal matters. Su Peijian looked up at him. Lin Feixing's eyes were sincere. She could tell that he was telling the truth. Su Peijian lowered her head to drink her tea. She knew that Xiang Kaiping liked Lin Feixing very much. She also knew that Xiang Kaiping would be happy if she could be with Lin Feixing. However, she said, there are some things that I haven't thought about yet. Let's not talk about these things today. Okay. This was Su Peijian's attitude. Lin Feixing was disappointed, but he was not very unhappy. It would be abnormal if Su Peijian agreed to him immediately. He liked Su Peijian like this. She was calm and rational. No matter what situation she was in, she seemed to be very calm. It's okay. I can wait. You can take your time to think about it. Su Peijian did not have any special feelings for Lin Feixing. He did not care about her past, and he was also the person that Xiang Kaiping liked. Putting aside the factor of love, Lin Feixing was indeed a very good marriage partner. However, that was all. As for the future, they would talk about it later. Ling Jing turned over and got down from Su Peijian's body. Both of them were covered in sweat, and they felt very sticky. Su Peijian did not want to move, but her body was really uncomfortable. She pushed Ling Jing and motioned for him to let go of her. Ling Jing did not let go. Not only did he not let go, but he also buried his face in Su Peijian's neck. Move away. No. Ling Jing held her waist and leaned over to kiss her lips. I don't want to. Ling Jing. You haven't fulfilled the conditions you promised me last time. What do you want? Ling Jing supported his body with one hand and stared at her face with burning eyes. Tomorrow is the weekend. How about spending 2 more days with me? No. I'm not free. Part of the project they were currently working on was overseas. She had a business trip tomorrow. You're not free on the weekend? I already said that your company will not collapse if you don't go to work for a day. Ling Jing, I have a business trip tomorrow. I'm not playing. Business trip? Ling Jing narrowed his eyes. What was there to go on a business trip in her small department store? Where are you going? Could it be that she wanted to leave him behind again in the name of a business trip? Ling Jing was inexplicably unhappy with this thought. Chapter 840. Where are you going? With whom? His possessive tone made Su Peijian frown. She realized that Ling Jing was getting more and more greedy since he went to the hot spring with her last time. Su Peijian didn't like his possessiveness, not to mention anything else. Who I go with and where I go have nothing to do with you, right? How can it have nothing to do with me? Ling Jing clasps her waist and is very dissatisfied with her move of distancing herself. Anyway, you are also my woman. Naturally, you have the right to ask, right? I am your woman. Su Peijian's expression didn't change, but there was a hint of sarcasm in her eyes. Are you sure? She belonged to herself and didn't belong to anyone else. Aren't you? Su Peijian pulled his hand away from her waist and prepared to get up. Ling Jing, you seem to have forgotten your identity. She hadn't said those words in a while. During this time, the two of them had a tacit understanding. Su Peijian didn't spend much time with Xiang Kaiping in the villa. She had been busy with work recently, and Xiang Kaiping knew that she would go to the company when she wanted to see her. Su Peijian spent almost every day with Ling Jing in the hot spring for more than half a month. No matter what Ling Jing's motive was, he was really good to her. He took care of her emotions and feelings in every way. She enjoyed this kind of simple relationship, and also enjoyed being with Ling Jing every night. She admitted that Ling Jing was quite a good lover, who could always make her feel relaxed and happy. But wasn't that Ling Jing's duty? Since he was the man she spent money on, shouldn't he put her first in everything? She didn't think there was anything wrong with her thinking, but Ling Jing's current behavior made her realize Ling Jing's greed. She didn't like it. Ling Jing thought that he had been unprecedentedly patient and flattering Su Peijian during this period of time. He was the dignified young Master Ling. When had he been so careful to flatter a woman? If it weren't for his own purpose, he would have killed a woman like Su Peijian in minutes. It was just a matter of waving his hand. Who am I? He couldn't control his anger. He held Su Peijian, who was about to leave, again and pressed her under his body. Tell me, who am I? You. Ling Jing in front of her made Su Peijian feel danger. Her intuition told her to escape now, but she didn't have the chance. Ling Jing lowered his head and began to bite Su Peijian's lips. He had never been a gentle lover. Most of the time, she acted according to her own will. Attack, plunder, barbaric strength, rude treatment. I am your man, he demanded fiercely, not giving her a chance to escape at all. Su Peijian, I hope you remember that I am your man now. Lunatic. Su Peijian struggled. Let go of me. The only response she got was Ling Jing's endless suppression and demands. That night Ling Jing was like a crazy beast. The young man's stamina and energy were always frighteningly good. Su Peijian was no match for him, and was defeated by him. Ling Jing did not stop because of her concession, but more and more wanted to conquer her. After finishing it in the room, he carried her to the bathroom to clean up, and did it again. When he came out of the bathroom, he didn't wait for her to dry off, and pressed her down on the sofa in the room again. In the end, Su Peijian almost lost consciousness. The last thought that remained was that she wanted to break off the relationship. Su Peijian didn't have time to break off the relationship with Ling Jing. The next morning, she couldn't get up at all. The weather in Rong City was getting warmer, but it was still very cold at this time. Ling Jing carried her in the bathroom, and didn't help her dry the water on her hair in time. Su Peijian, who had been tossed around for a long time, was sweating all over. Ling Jing woke up early in the morning, and didn't realize that he was still angry about yesterday's incident. He had already decided that yesterday was just the beginning. He had to let this woman know how powerful he was. He was still thinking about how to deal with Su Peijian, when he found that something was wrong with Su Peijian. Her breathing was heavier than usual. When he touched her, he found that her temperature was also higher than usual. Ling Jing finally realized that Su Peijian was sick. Staring at Su Peijian on the bed, whose face had turned red because of the fever, Ling Jing paused for a minute and finally had a reaction. Instead of sending Su Peijian to the hospital, he called the Ling family's private doctor. Fever 39. 5 degrees. Give her an injection to reduce the fever, and she'll be fine after taking some medicine. The doctor looked at Su Peijian on the bed. He wasn't sure what the relationship between the other party and the young master was, but he didn't ask much. Then hurry up and give it. Okay. Su Peijian was unconscious of the fever. Someone gave her an injection. She felt the pain and frowned slightly. At that moment, no coldness or arrogance could be seen on her face. Her little face was burning red, and her brows were slightly furrowed. Her whole body revealed a vulnerability that Ling Jing had never seen before. After sending the doctor away, Ling Jing looked at the medicine left by the bedside. It was rare for him to be kind. He went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. He wanted Su Peijian to take the medicine. Su Peijian didn't cooperate at all. Her mouth was tightly closed, and she had no intention of opening it. Ling Jing stared at her face for a long time. Because of the fever, Su Peijian's lips were a little redder than usual. At this time, Ling Jing had no other thoughts. After thinking about it, he forced the medicine into her mouth. After drinking some water, he lowered his head and poured it into her lips. The warm water entered her throat, and the medicine was swallowed by Su Peijian unconsciously. After feeding her, Ling Jing realized what he had done. He put down the cup and stared at Su Peijian with hatred. "Damn woman! How dare you ask me to serve you? You really don't want to live. When you recover, I will teach you a lesson." As he said so, he got up and wanted to ask someone to bring some digestible food. With Su Peijian's current physical condition, she could only drink porridge or soup. Before she could call for help, Su Peijian, who was sleeping on the bed, had sweat all over her forehead. She was sweating profusely and kept talking in her sleep. Her head shook slightly, and her face was full of pain. Ling Jing, who was about to leave, stopped. He stared at Su Peijian's face and seemed to be unsure. Su Peijian didn't respond to him. She was trapped in a nightmare and couldn't get out of it. Ling Jing didn't want to pay attention to her, but Su Peijian raised her hand at this time. He didn't know what she was dreaming about, but she gently waved her hand in the void. Only then did Ling Jing realize that Su Peijian seemed to be talking in her sleep. He stared at her face for a long time and lowered his head, trying to listen to what she was saying. "Don't." This time, Ling Jing finally heard it clearly. Su Peijian said don't. "Don't what?" "Su Peijian." "Don't," Su Peijian said again. Ling Jing stared at her face for a long time and gently moved to her ear. Chapter 841. Don't. Don't what? Ling Jing moved a little closer. Su Peijian was in a daze. Her voice was very soft and couldn't be heard clearly. He narrowed his eyes and stared at her face, moving closer to her lips. Because of her fever, her breath was hot. He was waiting for her to speak, but she didn't. When he got up and was about to leave, Su Peijian began to talk in her sleep again. "Don't, Dad. Don't, Mom." Why? She finally heard the last few sentences more clearly, but Ling Jing was startled. He stared at Su Peijian's face and thought about the information he had found. "Mom, why?" He stood up straight and stared straight at Su Peijian's face. After Su Peijian went to prison, she dreamed of her past almost every night. When she was the daughter of the Su family, when she was Li Qianshua's daughter, she still remembered how she was held in Li Qianshua's arms and listened to her fairy tales. She also remembered how Li Qianshua carefully cultivated her, from music, chess, calligraphy and painting to business and economics. She still remembered how Li Qianshua thought about her and arranged a marriage with Qiu Yanba for her. She thought it was the best marriage. She also remembered how Li Qianshua and Su Qinghui stayed by her bed when she was sick, afraid that she would feel uncomfortable. Those memories were so deep that unless Su Peijian lost her memory, she couldn't get rid of the first 20 years of her life. But later, she served her sentence in prison day after day. She waited day after day, but other than Xiang Kaiping, Li Qianshua didn't come. She understood. She couldn't go back. She could never go back. She couldn't get back what she had lost. Everything she once had became someone else's. It had nothing to do with her anymore. She still remembered when she celebrated her first birthday in prison. Other than Xiang Kaiping, who came to see her in the morning, no one else said a word of blessing to her. Her birthday in the first year would be the grandest event in Lin City. She would receive countless expensive gifts, and countless people who wanted to establish connections with the Su family, and the Li family would come to congratulate her. Most importantly, she would have her parents, grandfather and brother, Su Yusen, at her birthday party. Those were her most cherished family members. However, when she celebrated her birthday, none of those people appeared again. She kept waiting until midnight. When the flame went out, she finally understood that she couldn't go back. She couldn't go back to the past. Ever since that day, he had never dreamed of her past or her past. But today, she didn't know what was going on. Once again he fell into that nightmare. She dreamed that Li Qianshua broke up with Su Qinghui, and that Li Qianshua looked at her. Her tearful eyes seemed to be filled with helplessness. "You are not my daughter. Wrong, everything is wrong." Su Qinghui smiled bitterly at her in the dream. "I'm sorry, Peijian. I've done this to you. Peijian, forgive me. Peijian, I'm sorry." Su Qinghui's voice was like a curse to Su Peijian. Over and over again. It was just to remind her that she was not Li Qianxue's child. So what if she was not a child of the Li family? Could the feelings of more than 20 years be gone just like that? She really didn't understand. In the end, she didn't want to understand either. But maybe it was because of the illness. Or maybe it was because of her deepest desire. Su Peijian lay there powerlessly. The softest and most secret part of her body was exposed in front of others at this time. She thought that no one would know. But she didn't know that Ling Jing, who was beside her, had been standing by the bed, staring at Su Peijian's face. Watching her sleep. Watching her talk in her sleep. Watching her cry in her sleep. Ling Jing subconsciously reached out his hand. Just as he was about to touch Su Peijian's cheek, he suddenly withdrew his hand. He took a step back and stared at Su Peijian's face with an unreadable expression. Su Peijian slept for a long time. When she opened her eyes, it was dark outside. She had a bad headache. She blinked and couldn't tell where she was for a moment. The room was lit up, and the sudden light made her narrow her eyes. Her body was helped up, and there was a warm touch on her lips. Warm water entered her throat, and she swallowed instinctively. It was also at this time that she saw clearly who the person in front of her was. Ling Jing was holding a cup and carefully feeding her water. His eyes were gentle, and at that moment, his devilish face actually seemed to have a hint of gentleness. She was stunned for a moment and didn't respond further. "You're awake, so take the medicine," Ling Jing said. He put the cup in his hand on the bedside table, poured out the medicine, and put it into Su Peijian's mouth. It was bitter. The pill was very bitter. Su Peijian frowned. Ling Jing fed her water again. She was sick, and she took the medicine, so her mouth became more and more bitter. Her delicate eyebrows were knitted so tightly that a mosquito could be squeezed to death. "What's wrong?" Ling Jing looked at her with concern. Su Peijian looked at the gentleness in his eyes. For some reason, she blurted out the word bitter. "Bitter?" Ling Jing looked at her, then at the medicine on the side. Suddenly, he leaned over and kissed her lips. She was still sick, and she didn't have any strength in her body. Her mouth was also extremely bitter. However, the man still didn't dislike it at all. He directly gave her a deep kiss. She couldn't react at all, and the fever made her reason slower than usual. All her body could feel was the man's aura, the man's taste. She snuggled weakly in his arms, letting him kiss her wantonly, until he finally let her go. He gently caressed her lips, his eyes as gentle as water. "It won't be bitter like this, right?" As he spoke, he took a pillow from the side and placed it behind her. "I asked Xiao Zhao to come over and cook some porridge. You're sick, so you can only eat something light." Su Peijian didn't say anything. She watched Ling Jing get up and bring her porridge. Before she could reach out to take it, the man had already begun to feed her. It could be seen that Ling Jing had no experience doing this at all. His movements were very clumsy. He didn't even put the spoon in her mouth, but placed it on her lips. The slightly hot temperature made her avoid it. "It's hot. Hot." Ling Jing glanced at the spoon, blew on it, and handed it to her again. This time it wasn't hot. Su Peijian opened her mouth. The porridge was very bland. She had no taste in her mouth now, so it was actually the same no matter what she ate. Just looking at Ling Jing, she suddenly had a strange feeling. His relationship with her was based on money. It was normal for Ling Jing to please her, but he didn't need to do this. Su Peijian kept looking at Ling Jing as the porridge entered her stomach. He was also looking at her. His eyes were focused, and it actually made his usual devilish appearance a lot gentler. At this moment, Su Peijian's usually calm heart had a very imperceptible fluctuation. After finishing the porridge, Ling Jing put the bowl aside. "How do you feel? Do you still want to sleep?" Su Peijian shook her head. "Give me my phone." "Phone?" Ling Jing thought of the phone ringing just now. He originally wanted to answer Su Peijian's call. In the end, he didn't answer it. A lack of forbearance in small matters would spoil great plans. He was patient and could endure. Holding her phone, Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing with a bit of inquisitiveness in her eyes. There were a total of 10 missed calls on her phone, from Xiang Kaiping, Su Qinghui and Lin Feixing. After drinking the porridge, she felt much better, and called Xiang Kaiping first. Peijian, Feixing said he couldn't find you, so he came to our house. Where are you? Mom, I'm fine. I just put my phone on silent mode, and didn't receive any calls. Why is your voice so hoarse? I'm fine. I just have a little cold. You're sick. Xiang Kaiping suddenly became nervous. Where are you? Are you in Rome Garden? I'll come to see you now. Mom, it's okay. I've taken the medicine, and it's almost done. I'll be fine after a nap. Are you really fine? I'm really fine. Mom, don't worry. It's just a little cold. I'll be fine after a nap. How could Su Peijian dare to let Xiang Kaiping come? If she really came, how would she explain when she met Ling Jing? Then have a good rest. By the way, call Feixing back later. He's very worried about you. I know I will. After hanging up, Su Peijian called Su Qinghui. He was in Lin City. Lin Feixing called Su Peijian, but she didn't answer, so he tried to contact Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui heard Su Peijian's voice and knew that she had a cold, so he told her to have a good rest. I'll come to see you in 2 days. Okay. After hanging up, Su Peijian felt a headache. However, she did remember that she had agreed to go on a business trip with Lin Feixing today. Sorry. As soon as the call was connected, Su Peijian apologized first. I have a cold. I'm not feeling well, so I haven't gone to the airport since I slept. You're sick. Lin Feixing's tone suddenly changed. Where are you? I came to see you. I went to your house to look for you, but your mom said you weren't home. I'm in my apartment near my company. You don't have to come. I'll be fine after a nap. I'm really sorry that I didn't meet you today. I might have to trouble you to explain it to me later. It's okay. You're sick, so have a good rest. I'll go on my own this time. Take care of yourself. Okay. Su Peijian really felt sorry. Sorry to trouble you. I'm really sorry this time. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were sick. After hanging up, Ling Jing happened to come in from outside. When she called Xiang Kaiping earlier, he had already gone out. Such a thoughtful gesture made Su Peijian look at him in a new light. This man was really annoying when he was clingy, but sometimes he was very gentlemanly. He was obviously a hooligan, but he had such a gentlemanly temperament. It was amazing. Ling Jing came in and saw Su Peijian holding the phone and looking at him. He took a few steps forward, took the phone out of her palm, and put it aside. You're not well yet. Rest more. As he spoke, he put her hand in his palm and held it tightly. Business can never be finished. When the body collapses, there will be nothing left. Su Peijian was silent. It felt very strange to hear such words from a person like Ling Jing. Do you want to sleep for a while more? No. Su Peijian shook her head. I feel very uncomfortable. I want to take a shower. Let me help you take a shower. Ling Jing volunteered, but Su Peijian instinctively refused. No. If it weren't for him yesterday, she wouldn't have been sick or caught a cold. Ling Jing circled her body as she was about to get up and stared at her face. Don't worry. I'm not so perverted as to bully a patient. Su Peijian didn't believe him, but Ling Jing had already got up and went in the direction of the bathroom. When he came out after filling the hot water for Su Peijian, he saw that Su Peijian was really going to get out of bed. He quickly went forward and picked her up. Ling Jing, put me down. I said I'll help you. Ling Jing's eyes were gentle, and he fixed his gaze on Su Peijian. Su Peijian couldn't refuse him anymore. Her clothes were taken off. Su Peijian looked at Ling Jing's movements, and for the first time, she felt a little shy. Soon her body was put into the bathtub. The water temperature was very suitable, and her body was surrounded by water. If Ling Jing hadn't messed around with her in this bathtub yesterday, she wouldn't have caught a cold. At first, she looked at Ling Jing with some defense. Later, she realized that when he said he would help her take a bath, he really did help her take a bath. She watched as Ling Jing washed her body. At that moment, she suddenly returned to her childhood. There were servants at home, but Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui really doted on her. Most of the time, they would rather do it themselves. Li Qianxue bathed her, and Su Qinghui gently dried her hair. His palm touched that extremely secret place, and Su Peijian actually felt that her face was burning for a moment. For Ling Jing, this bath was also extremely difficult. The beauty in the bathtub had lost her usual fierce aura because of her illness, because of the beauty's illness, and instead, she was a little more delicate. That different appearance brought a brand new excitement. He couldn't wait to directly do this damned woman here and now. He resisted the impulse in his heart and suppressed the almost uncontrollable excitement in his lower body. He calmly bathed her, then picked her up and wiped her. From beginning to end, his movements were extremely gentle. Su Peijian was carried in his arms and returned to the room. He carefully dried the water for her and put her on the bed. Have a good rest. Su Peijian was still sick and weak. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to fall asleep. It was just that she had slept too much during the day. Although she was sleepy, she couldn't fall asleep so quickly. Ling Jing followed her to the bed, lay down beside her, and reached out to encircle her in his arms. Sleep. She looked up at him. He smiled at her and leaned over to kiss her on the lips. I'll sleep with you. You'll be fine after a good sleep. Preposterous reasoning. She had never heard of anyone who could be cured after a good sleep. Su Peijian wanted to refute, but after her body was encircled by his arms, she really relaxed. Closing her eyes and feeling Ling Jing's hot chest in front of her, she finally indulged herself and fell into a deep sleep. Her body subconsciously snuggled in Ling Jing's direction, tightly pressed against his chest. Chapter 842. Su Peijian got off the bed and casually draped a robe over her body. She moved her limbs and felt that her body was still weak, but not as weak as the day before yesterday. She didn't expect that she, who had always been in good health, would be sick for 2 days. He had slept the day before yesterday and the day before yesterday. He was finally in better spirits today. Looking at the calendar, he didn't have to worry about going to work, because today was the weekend. After sleeping for 2 days, he was exhausted. She went to the bathroom and turned on the water. The bath made her feel much more comfortable. Before she could get up from the bathtub, the bathroom door was hurriedly opened, and Ling Jing came in from the outside. When he saw her, there was obvious disapproval in his eyes. You haven't recovered yet. What are you doing? He picked up a large towel from the side, walked over, and reached out to lift Su Peijian's body. He wrapped her in a towel and carried her out of the room. If you're not feeling well, you should rest more. You can bathe anytime. What if you catch a cold again? Ling Jing kept talking, with some concern and some blame in her eyes. Su Peijian didn't say anything. She let Ling Jing dry her body and let him carry her back to the bed. Looking at the side of Ling Jing's face, she thought about how Ling Jing had been taking care of her when she was sick these past 2 days. He could have asked little Zhao to do it, but he didn't. He wouldn't have asked someone else to do it. As long as it was related to her, Ling Jing would automatically do it. Eat and take a bath. In fact, she didn't think she needed anyone to take care of her. No one will take care of you if you get sick in prison. After being released from prison, she lived with Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping always took care of her and cared about her in every aspect. But that kind of care always made her feel pressured. Without the support of the Li family and the Su family, Su Qianxi was not a good person. She no longer had the capital to act spoiled and willful. If it was just a slight discomfort, she would rather endure it on her own. But Ling Jing's care and concern for the past 2 days made her feel like she had returned to the past. When she was not well, when she was sick, there were people around her, taking care of her. She seemed to have become the daughter of the Li family and the Su family again. Her relationship with Ling Jing was not like that. She knew it and she knew it. The relationship between the two of them was nothing more than a kept woman and a kept woman. Ling Jing could take care of her or not. There won't be any effect. Ling Jing's actions made Su Peijian feel that perhaps it really had nothing to do with money. Look, your hair is wet. Looking at Su Peijian's wet hair, Ling Jing got up to find a hairdryer to dry Su Peijian's hair. In fact, this action was very rare for him. His movements were very clumsy, and there were a few times when Su-Peision felt like her scalp was about to be scalded off. However, after noticing the slight change in his expression, he quickly moved the hairdryer further away. She could not help looking up at him again. Ling Jing's enchanting face, with a bit of concentration at this time, gently lifted her hair, took the hairdryer not far away, and dried her back and forth. His expression was so serious that it gave her the illusion that the person in front of her wasn't drying her hair, but was doing some amazing project. After drying her hair, he gently combed her hair and put it behind her head. Done. Realizing that Su-Peision was staring at him, he suddenly bent down to look her in the eyes. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.